Wake the dead.
Wake the dead. Wake the dead.
With Sean McCann. Greetings, and welcome to another episode of Wake the Dead podcast. Today, we are blessed to have a survivor who is here to tell her story. Her name is Charissa. Charissa, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Awesome. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. So I heard your story on Imagination podcast with Emma, and she's doing great work, and I love that she's exposing, looking under all the dark, dirty rocks and seeing all the worms, because we need to be aware of these things, and so I thank her if she's listening. Thank you, Emma, for your work, and your story was very interesting to me, and I contacted you. I would like to learn more about the structure of what you've witnessed, and the mental what you've had to deal with. Basically, the more we look at it, and the more that people can learn about this, the more they'll be able to see it around them, the more they'll recognize it, that way we will be more empowered to fight what's coming and what they're doing. Welcome, Charissa. Thank you for joining us. Please
Thanks.
Tell us. You're from Utah, and you were a member. You grew up as a member of the Mormon Church. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. From my birth, and I have a strong pioneer ancestry and heritage, which those of us who do have this type of experience is more common than somebody who's a convert or only goes back a generation or so, or had a parent who was converted. Right. That strong lineage, because it's actually a Luciferian bloodline.
Right. So the bloodlines that started the Mormon Church, it started as a Luciferian organization. Is that how you understand it?
Unknowingly, yes. And I would actually love to read at some point, early in our conversation,
sure,
a section from the Book of Mormon, because a lot of people dismiss the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith and the church as a whole as just being made up, or, a lot of people who I share my story with who don't know a lot about Mormonism are just like, I don't understand how these people can believe this crap,
Right. Yeah.
But they did a really good job of setting up the church, and the Book of Mormon isn't just some made up book that Joseph Smith was some kind of idiot, from everything that I have studied. And I've read the Book of Mormon several times when I was Mormon. I was a very devout Mormon who didn't understand, there's a term called Jack Mormons, and those are the people who are not really living the lifestyle fully. But I went through the Mormon temple. I got married in the Mormon temple, took out endowments, wore the compass and the square, initiated in the rites of Freemasonry on my garments,
right.
And read the Book of Mormon several times. And so I was told by a lot of my higher up leaders that's very rare for women in the church, and I think they like it that way. But, in the Book of Mormon, there's a whole passage that I believe actually prophesies their own self. So if you understand Hegelian dialectic and how the Freemasons speak, they're kind of double speak. And a lot of times there's that, like the Freudian slip, the way that they talk. A lot of times, if you can listen and flip what's being said, They're revealing who they are a lot of times by accusing others, or the way their prophecies actually work. There's this whole segment in the Book of Mormon that I pulled a couple verses out of that I would love to share to give some context to who the Mormon church really is.
Awesome.
Because I believe that Joseph Smith, well, I know he was a Freemason, which means that he was a sodomite, because one of the greatest kept secrets in Freemasonry that a lot of people don't realize is that the rites of sodomy the rites of Freemasonry at a certain level are based on sodomy rituals. And the reason that they do that is because that's a way that they pass the demonic information and the spiritual mysticism without speaking. And that's the way they've been able to keep it such a secret for so many generations. Just like the Druids, they can actually go and have full-blown spirit conversations in the spirit, because they shatter open the mind's eye, and they do it generationally in these families starting at birth. So if you're in a generational Freemason family, most of these men who are grown adults who are Freemasons, and in Mormonism, it's kind of their own sect of Freemasonry. So some of them aren't particularly active in separate Freemasonry. It's its own kind of branch of Freemasonry. But they're initiated into it at birth.
So if like I've done a lot of looking into Aleister Crowley and those type of rituals, ceremonial magic, and also demon possession. I've learned that demons can be input through rape of, like, not just anal, but all the orifices. Demons can enter. And with what I've learned of SRA programming is that demons are placed within the victim to shore up the walls of the amnesia between the dissociative identities within. So in order to maintain the structure, the demons within will punish it's like a mental punishment where the abuse is happening in the mind, and the demon is keeping all of the disparate dissociative identities in check. Basically, it's like putting a cop in the heads of somebody to control their will and their thoughts. So it's not like where you have to, I'm signing this contract with the devil, and I'm like, it's not like you're agreeing with it. It's raped into the victim. I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, and they use a lot of, just like you said, they use a lot of bestiality and dentistry for those very purposes. They use dogs, horses, goats. There's a lot of goat farms around where I lived in the entrance of neighborhoods or within neighborhoods. And that was one of the things I saw when my mind kind of was shattered open and my programming just like failed in a single day. And I could feel what was going on at a lot of places that I was driving by. And so they use animals. And then there is, like, Utah, and dentistry is one of the hugest, because that's why they push you to get in every 6 months to your dentist. And a lot of these dentists are sorcerers, and they're working in one of your sexual orifices.
Right.
And so they can do programming and manipulation, because that's an opening into the soul. And I'm just becoming more and more aware of some women that I'm currently working with, how much when they start defecting from the program and discovering what's going on and what's happening to their children currently, that these men, their husbands who are in these brotherhoods, ex-husbands, are really pushing them to get their children back into the dentist. And there's actually situations where the government has, allowed a whole custody issue to be brought up by these men for just claiming that their wife simply didn't take their child to the dentist.
Wow.
Their usual visit.
And they can use the government and say, you're not caring for the child by not bringing him to the dentist. And then the government will use their strong arm and then help the cult member, right? I mean,
yeah, because the government's run by cult members and Freemasons.
Yes,
and
exactly.
So absolutely, they're all in. And that was one of the hugest discoveries that I made, and why I was pushed, out into the public eye to tell my story, because I saw at every single level of corruption in the 7 mountains of culture how incredibly not infiltrated, but run. It's been run since its inception. We've just been lied to. A lot of people go, oh, well, it's been infiltrated. Right. And it's like, no, all of these organizations and orders that govern us, church, state, art, it's all been, raised up by the God of this earth. So that's why it's all Satanism behind the scenes. We're just now discovering it. And in the beginning, everybody was going, oh, well, it's been infiltrated, and it's not everybody, and it's not the highest, and it's not the leaders of the Mormon church. Of course, there's going to be a few bad men here and there throughout. And it's like, no, it's the opposite.
Right.
That was how it began from its inception. And now we're just starting to understand. And you can't even be called to be a Mormon bishop or stake president if you're not a oath-keeping Freemason.
Right.
My brother was in a huge stake. My dad was the bishop of the same ward that my brother was the bishop in. And my brother was called to be the bishop several years later when he was raising his kids in the same ward. And usually the life of a bishop's only 5 years, and he was in for 7 years. And when he got done, it had destroyed his whole family. He lost his marriage. He was never around his kids in the most vital years of their lives being a bishop. And they wanted to call him in to be the stake president shortly thereafter. And he told them no, and he ended up leaving the church for a little while. But I think everybody tried to clean him up and get him right back in there as soon as he got remarried. But he told him no, that he wasn't going to be the stake president. And we sat at the river one day together, smoking a little bowl together, and he sat and told me the truth of how, he had general authority sit him down and ask him to come and be the stake president. And he told him, no, I'm not going to do it. And he said the reason that they wanted him is because there was no other options. There was no other options, and they needed him. Well, why would that be? Because there's no other Freemasons in his stake boundaries, because Mormonism is run on ley lines of physical boundaries. There's borders in which you have to.
You said you're talking about the boundaries of the ley lines and how that's where the boundaries of the state. I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, Mormon wards and stakes are set up in physical boundaries on a mapping system. And the reason they do it that way is because there's 12 to 13 Coven active, cult active, Freemason, generational Illuminati families that they make sure are within the structure of each ward in order to keep everybody under control. CIA, there's the secret CIAs all over in Mormonism, and they have a whole program that my mom told me about that they used to admit that they had, and then they came out publicly and denied it later down the road, but it's definitely still there. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it's essentially like a tattletale system where if somebody's defecting from the Mormon church as part of either one of these families or with information, they have a system of reporting to happen so that they can hone them back in.
Right.
And so the whole reason, that my brother was so needed is because they didn't have somebody who would keep their secrets, because when kids are coming in at 12, 13 going, oh, my dad's molesting me, they have to know how to handle that. Right. And they're very well trained in order to know how to deal with that, to keep everything hidden so that they can function.
Wow. You said a lot there. So okay, so the beginning of America and the Church of Mormon and the Freemasons, you see them as starting satanic Luciferian. And I mean, if you look at Albert Pike and Morals and Dogma, it says in the book, hey, Lucifer is the big guy on top, and he's the real one we worship. Anybody, you can be of any religion, whatever, but at the end, you're, it's the light of Lucifer. And so I recognize that's true. So the Mormon Church, I assume, started as a satanic organization. I'm sure that's why they kept getting pushed further west and further west into the desert of Utah, where nobody will mess with them. So, okay, please, if you want to say something, please interrupt. But I'm just trying to process this. So I understand about ley lines, and I understand about. I do believe that anytime there is a hierarchical structure of obedience, there you will find Satanism. I mean, that's in order to keep their structure, they need him because he is, member of the secrets, order or whatnot. And so they have to have him in that place, because without that, there's no one to command those below him on further lower down the pyramid. And in order to have this structure of control, they need to have these people that obey and comply with their orders, right? And so, like, if you look at government or police or like many different, the way that the structure of obedience is created is the person at the bottom of the pyramid doesn't have free will, and the person at the top gets to choose what the other person does. So it's like it's a pyramid of slavery, basically. Yeah. And well, basically, if free will is being denied, then that's where I see Satanism. Yeah. And if it's an organized structure, then for sure Satanism. So like this makes sense to me that they needed him. And what did they do if he didn't comply?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
If like who didn't comply, Lucifer?
Like,
or if,
no, I mean your brother.
longer...
If your brother didn't comply to be in their structure of obedience, did he comply, or what happened?
No, he didn't. He told him no, that he wasn't going to be the state president. He said no. Right. They were trying to call him to that position, and I think that's why he took a break for a while and got into. I mean, the thing that's interesting about Freemason and Mormonism is they'll let people within the Illuminati families and the like, my brothers are also in the secret CIA. They will let them secretly defect intentionally. Like my brother, my closest brother at the time, he intentionally defected from the Mormon church in order to be my handler so that we could be relatable to each other. And so, he looked like he was going into some more new age stuff. And my other brother, I think when he left, like Freemasonry has so many other branches within Mormonism, within Utah, that doesn't necessarily have to be Mormon, because there's a ton of Wicca going on. There's a ton of Illuminati within like the plant medicine communities that are, with ayahuasca ceremonies and stuff like that. The Illuminati has witches deep and thick within all these different little sects. And so they can let somebody defect and go out and handle people from another area. Right. And so my brother was doing some stuff with what do you call it? He lived with me after he got divorced for 6 months, and he was deep into the fighting scene. With
like the jiu-jitsu type stuff, or the
like MMA stuff. Yeah, and he had a specific guy that he was sponsoring, named Sean Powers, who was a fighter in Las Vegas. And so he was getting really into like going to their fights. And I don't know if he was handling fighters or what was going on, but eventually after let's see, when was it? Before I found out who my family was, one of the people that they sent to get me to shut me up was this Sean Powers guy. Like they set up a whole meeting between us at a hot spring, and he came on really strong trying to take me out and train me in his gym and all this stuff. And I realized like he knew my whole family, and he acted like it was some big, huge surprise and all this stuff. But then he spent one whole day standing over me in an authoritative position for a whole half hour, giving me this preach and sermon on how I needed to shut up and nobody cared about Freemasonry. Why am I talking about this stupid shit nobody cares about? He like went off on me. And that was when I started realizing he was sent to shut me up. Like they want me to shut up. I didn't realize the full effect of it until later, and how he had, it's interesting too, because they can set up scenario after scenario that you think you chose, and you're being handled, and they're setting up a meeting and a connection in order to do their agenda, but,
so they can make you believe you're getting free, and they can catch you with some other arm of their orders, right? Is that,
my one brother was, because I was going to start my own podcast. I had all my equipment. I had it set up in my office. I had a designer doing my my logo and everything. I mean, I was like days away from getting on the mic and start talking about what was going on in the Mormon church, not knowing my family was in on it. And my brother and his buddy, who I think was a third wheel in his marriage, were pushing me to start this. You know, it was like, oh yeah, you have, it was funny. They said to me one day, they're like, most women have like, what is it, 40,000 words a day. And you have like 80, you definitely need 80,000 words a day. You need to start your own podcast and, you know, get all this out there. And, but at the same time, they'd be like, well, what are you going to talk about? You know, and really my brother was coming to my house, got me to rent one of their family properties that was owned by a bunch of Freemasons, and they were spying on me there. They were messing with the water. My brother would come and check my mail there. My sister was supposedly living in my RV, but she would come in my house at night and go through my computer. And, you know, I was being completely spied on and handled because they wanted to know what I was going to go out and say, to the point that when I wrote papers of sovereignty one night and scribbled them out, because I was going through the process of trying to move from maritime jurisdiction to land jurisdiction. And I don't know how familiar you are with that.
Free man on the land, right?
Yeah.
Straw man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that whatever I was doing with land jurisdiction, that seemed to have been infiltrated too, which it was. The woman that I was studying, her name is Anna von Reitz, and she used to be a judge. And she comes out and reveals how the whole bar system and all the judges and most attorneys are actually also Satanists, right. And that they know it's Satanism, and that's why they wear the robes that they do. That's why they kneel at the bar, because it's a hierarchy of mastery, right. Which is why your own attorney is subservient to the prosecutor, right. And to the judge, you know, and they have secret meetings behind your back, and your attorney doesn't really represent you at all. They're a gatekeeper. Right. And I found that, I mean, literally just barely, I still have criminal charges against me that they framed me for child endangerment. And so I'm still majorly fighting off that case. And my own attorney just barely quit on me a few weeks ago. And so I'm left representing myself. And it's still going on. They're still gatekeeping and trying to prevent me at every corner from being able to do anything, from even to be able to have custody of my own kids, which is why they, you know, and the cops helped with that. The attorneys helped with that. My own attorneys helped with that. The judges help with that. And all it takes is a phone call or a handshake from an in-network brother, man. And, you know,
so, I mean, they have the whole system is theirs. That's one of the, I mean, like I advocate for anarchy, and, you know, free will negates all authority. There is no authority. There's only mind control and slavery. And so the entire government system is evil as it is, right? And then, okay, so now we recognize, yes, it's run by Satanists, and then people think that they can still get justice, and they're like, oh, well, I'm like, rest in peace, Tracy Twyman Tracy Twyman's a writer, author, thinker. She's recently passed away. I don't think it was of her own hand, and she discovered pedophile ring like in YouTube, and they're like advertising on YouTube, and they're like, you know, and she goes to the FBI. And I'm like, what? And then like not even very shortly after that, she's dead. So like this is, I mean, you can't think that the system is going to help you, because it is fully, I mean, so they have your children. They took your kids.
My ex-husband, they just gave him full custody. And he was secretly half Iranian his entire life without me knowing, which he claims he found out after we got divorced. I don't buy it for 1 second. I believe he was a product of breeding, in bloodline breeding. The Mormon Church does a lot of stuff with the Muslim Brotherhood, the 14th secret bloodline of the Illuminati. And there's a lot of weird stuff around my ex-husband's conception. And my brother told me, he didn't know I knew what it meant, but my brother at one point said, oh yeah, he's just on the left-hand path, because there's a left-hand path and the right-hand path, and the left hand's like black magic and the right-hand path is like fake Christianity and white magic. And so depending on wherever you're at, he told me my ex-husband's on the left-hand path. So he's into way darker stuff than even my family, I believe, who's in the right-hand path, because I think my mom is a white witch. But yeah, absolutely. I advocate and push. That's why I wrote a deliverance handbook from the beast systems, in order to spiritually disconnect, because when we're born under these spells and curses by these governing satanic systems, they steal your birthrights. And so a lot of people who can't get out from under that, especially when you're born into generations and generations of curses from your family who's been in contract with the devil, for generations, you trying to get out. Like, a lot of people want to go out and start speaking and they're like, oh, I've got to tell my story, and, we can't stop them. So we just have to tell the truth. And it's like, no, I tried to tell the truth. And that was what they did to me. Yeah, you can tell the truth, but there's an order to it. You have to break your curses first. You have to do the work to get out from under these systems, spiritually, before you can go out and talk physically, because that's when you put yourself in harm's way and in danger. And like you said, it's really naive to try to go get help. And this is written in my book. Going and trying to get justice within a satanic government system is like going to Satan and saying, hey, Satan, can you help me? There's these Satanists over here trying to, and so Satan, can you get me out from under this? And
they're doing
Satan,
your will to destroy me. Can you please help? Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So, wow. So, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were on a roll there.
You're good.
Okay. So you, what they did to you, right? So you kind of mentioned that. What did they do to you? We don't have to get into the, like what happened. I guess we don't. I mean, when you tried to break free, what did they do to you?
Well, let me read this first, because I want to set the background and the stage for what Mormonism is.
Okay.
And then I can go into why they had the power to do to me what they did to me and how. Because the Mormon Church, in the Book of Mormon, the main prophet in the beginning and the main tribe within the Book of Mormon is called the prophet's Nephi, and the tribe is called Nephites.
Right.
And, I haven't met anybody else who knows this, but because of what happened to me and like the anointing on my life to be a whistleblower on every level of how the Mormon Church has started and runs all of these mountains of culture, especially in Utah. Utah's, I think, probably literally like the butthole of the entire earth, the worst, most evil. And I'm not even kidding you. Like my mom used to tell me when I was a little girl that like Salt Lake City, when the end times came and Jesus returned, that Salt Lake City would be the most evil city on the entire planet. And I believe that the Mormon Luciferians who run the church like get off on knowing that.
Right. I'm sorry, but I've learned that Vatican City has given the Mormons a temple. So like they have representation in the Vatican now, where like the worldwide control of Satanism is like, so the Mormons with their what's supposedly a false religion to the Catholics, the Catholics are like, here, have a church. You're one of us guys. Come on. So this is another example of, yes, it's just another form of the same satanic, worldwide structure of domination of people, like we're cattle.
Well, Mormonism and Catholicism are two parts of 5 parts of the hierarchy and structure of the Illuminati. You've got Mormons and Catholics work hand in hand in their Satanism and in their rituals, to the point where there's literally tunnels that go from the Salt Lake Temple up under the Catholic church that's right up the road. There's like 2 or 3 other churches right there next to each other where the tunnels run through, and they meet up underneath and do their rituals together. Right. I mean, they're one and the same. Right. And the 5 structures in the Illuminati, the 5 branches of the Illuminati that are all at the highest levels, they're set up for child trafficking and human trafficking in order to feed the blood and the sex and the incest of children to the beast in order to keep him fed, and that's their role and responsibility, is to provide children. So you've got the Mormons, the Catholics, the Satanists, the Freemasons, and the Cabal, which is like basically everything else, like the government, Hollywood, all that stuff.
Nice.
And at the highest level,
I would think Cabal is like
children. At the lower, they're feeding.
You cut there for a second.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. So the Cabal.
Did you get all 5 of them?
I got all 5 of them, and I think when I think Cabal, I think Kabbalism and that whole Zionism thing. Those guys are probably involved too. But anyway.
Oh yeah, the Kabbalah tree, all of that stuff is one of the it's like
the internal structure of their programming, right? They structure it towards the. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. It's probably the demons are working on your computer.
I know. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they've been attacking strong. They don't want me to talk.
Okay.
But yeah, so the Kabbalah tree is the inversion of the tree of life that they use, that they place within all of these structural points of the body. Yeah, to implant, a whole programming device. And so, but the Cabal, Cabal, is, essentially just the highest echelons of the Illuminati and all the other branches that aren't specific like the other ones that I named. Like the 5 dark mothers that channel direct from Satan, the 13 bloodlines, all of the other, that function in that aspect of the hierarchy.
The smaller, like because it's like rings within rings, right? You got the Freemasonry, and then like the first 3 of the Freemasons, they're porch masons. They don't know what's going on. And then the Red Lodge, and then you get further up, it's smaller, like Shriners is within the Freemasons, and then Jesters within the Shriners, and like above. So, I mean, it's pyramidal. So I'm assuming the Cabal is like the higher pieces, the little ones that are in charge of the. Yeah,
they're the ones behind. They're the puppet masters, behind it all. Those bloodlines, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, all those bloodlines, and then a lot of them that have changed their names, and then the 300 that sit underneath them. That's all the Cabal,
right?
Which I believe are the bloodlines of the seed of the serpent seed, and then the Nephilim, right. And so that's what I wanted to get into with what's in the Book of Mormon and with the Nephites.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Is it hit me one day? I was sitting there, and my kids have some interesting spiritual gifts, and my kids, I'm a dream interpreter. So we always write down our dreams and stuff. And I had an old dream from my daughter when we were still Mormon, sitting on the floor in a notebook. And I looked down, and it said Nephi. And I'd been studying so much about the Nephilim lately. It hit me that the name Nephi is the first several letters of the word Nephilim. Right. And then like a whole download just was impressed upon me about where Mormonism came from. And then I just understood it on a whole different level, because I actually believe that Joseph Smith is a hybrid Nephilim bloodline. And that I believe that it was started, because he was from the UK, and a lot of the families that came over, the early saints of the Mormon church, came from the UK. And I believe that they were the Mormon church is full of Egyptian magic and witchcraft. And so I believe that they were escaping, probably even under persecution then, because as soon as Joseph came to America, everything he was doing, that's why they raised him up as having been a martyr and having been under so much persecution, because he was a great deceiver, and because he was doing magic and treasure hunting and all of these things. And I believe that they were trying to get out from that in the UK, and came and, started taking land from the Indians from the get-go with all of his Freemason buddies. And, I believe that part of the reason he had so much power in his magic is because he's a hybrid. And I believe that he was channeling Nephilim in the Book of Mormon, which is why I can't discount a lot of things that the Book of Mormon says. There is a lot of truth in it. And it's definitely it has too much wisdom and intelligence in it to have just been made up. Like I believe it was a channeling from the fallen angels through the Nephilim.
So you think Moroni is like one of the Nephilim, and you think maybe that by Joseph Smith saying, "Hey, I saw these Nephites," like Ite is like son of, right? Isn't it like of Neph, they come from Neph, right? And so in the word itself is like, these guys are from the Nephilim, and that's why you should listen to me, guys, because it has so much authority, so that makes sense that Joseph Smith would use that word and use that as an authoritative statement, instead of just, because like they would be, if he was like, oh, these guys are named Joey whatever, then they wouldn't take him seriously. They have to, because it is a kind of far out story, and if he's bringing it back to these regular settlers, they're not going to want to believe that. But if he's like, oh, I heard it from a Nephilimite, then they're like, oh, whoa, oh, okay, I understand, and that makes sense.
Yeah, so because all of the Ite tribes in the Bible were all of the Nephilim tribes of the giants who God was having the Israelites, God's people, take out. When he said destroy every man, woman, and child and take out their animals and don't even collect any of their spoil, that was because these people were doing, blood rituals, bestiality. Right. They were so defiled. It was like, don't even take their spoil. Don't even touch it. It's so defiled. Right. And so though, yeah, these Ite tribes are definitely in the Bible, another pattern, and in of wickedness. And then in the Book of Mormon, it goes back and forth between the Nephites and then his brother Laman, who is supposedly the evil one, and the Lamanites. And so you have the Lamanites and the Nephites, and they say the covenant would go back and forth between the Nephites and the Lamanites, and that their skin would also change color according to who had the covenant. And that's where that whole interesting lie about, the Gentiles being the chosen and their fair skin being, the sign of their covenant with God. And then when their skin would get darkened, that was when they were, under covenant curse.
That's so silly. I mean, it's like, that's what we see in other people. It's like, it has to be the most visible thing about another person so that you can, anyway, we don't need to go into that. But so they had the Nephites and the Lamanites, like the layman, like the stupid ones, and then the ones from angels. Like, it's really silly.
Well, that's what I'm always giggling too, because God's really interesting, because he'll allow the fallen angels to give channelings, because I saw it in the New Age too. Everybody I knew who was doing channelings and stuff, looking back, I realized they were all just talking to fallen angels. And so when they do it, there's usually a lot of like trails left behind of their deceit and who they really are. Even the fact that Mormons are called Mormons is it's moronic. And, layman is like lame men, and Nephites are Nephilim. And so he allowed this whole thing to be channeled. But that was what I loved about having believed it for so long and studied it so well. And God did this to me several times. He allowed me to go into the pit of the belly of the beast with like a veil of innocence and naivety in order to learn about something that was going on within. And later I would get out and go, how the hell did I ever believe that stupid shit? But I really didn't. I was just trying stuff on, and I would always shelf stuff and try it on for a while, to the point that I could speak it, that I believed it, so that I could come out later and go, yeah, that ain't the way. That ain't it. And so let me read from this Mormon passage.
Please do. Please do.
Cut some passages out, because it's interesting, because I believe that the Mormon church is prophesying their own selves in this passage as if it's a church without, but it's really them. And so if you put on a Hegelian dialectic mindset and a Freudian speak, so that you're flipping what is being said here towards their own selves. Because like when I was in the New Age or doing energy healing, one of my kind of mantras was that you're only ever talking to yourself, because you don't know anybody's filters. If you're preaching to yourself. You need to really just hold a mirror up 99.9% of the time that you're talking. And that's what's going on here in the Book of Mormon.
Awesome.
So okay, so it said, and this is from Nephi 14, 1 Nephi 14. So it's only a few of them that I pulled out, but the whole chapter is enlightening. Like if anybody's listening to this and they're Mormon and they want to look more into this, or even anybody who's not, like there's twists of truth in here too, which is like Satan will tell you 99 lies to get in one lie. And so, I believe there's also true prophecies within this passage. So it says, and it shall come to pass that if the Gentiles shall hearken unto the Lamb of God in that day, he shall manifest himself unto them in word and also in power, in very deed, unto the taking away of their stumbling blocks. And I believe there are stumbling blocks. And harden not their hearts against the Lamb of God. They shall be numbered among the seed of thy father. Yea, they shall be numbered among the house of Israel. And they shall be a blessed people upon the promised land forever. They shall be no more brought down into captivity, which is what Mormons don't realize their own captivity. And the house of Israel shall no more be confounded. And that great pit, which hath been digged for them by that great and abominable church, which was founded by the devil and his children, that he might lead away the souls of men down to hell. Yea, that great pit, which hath been digged for the destruction of men, shall be filled by those who digged it. Wow. Unto their utter destruction, saith the Lamb of God, not the destruction of the soul, save it be casting of it into hell, which hath no end. So I believe they're also prophesying what I've been seeing and receiving revelation about is the destruction of their own selves, which are the ones actually who are the great and abominable church. So, for behold, this is according to the captivity of the devil, and also according to the justice of God, upon those who will work wickedness and abomination before him. And which recently said to my friend somebody that I'm working with, helping set her family free. She said her mom's a generational witch, and she puts people's faces upon an altar, and she's seen her mom actually kill 3 people in a 2-week period just by doing this witchcraft. And she was talking to her about some stuff. She's like, well, I'm not scared, I have my God, and I'm not afraid of all that. They don't have any power over me. And she said that they have they know you're a God, and they know also their own destruction, and they're not afraid. So this woman was setting herself up as having escaped generational witchcraft, but she was still in it. That's one thing that they do. They'll tell you who their family is. They'll tell you who their friend is. They won't tell you that they're still in it in order to gain position in your life to handle you. And one of the things that they believe is that they will be saved regardless, but that they're doing a certain job or position for the devil. And so she talks about how they're aware of their own destruction, which is one of those kind of ideas taken from the Muslim religion. They have their suicide bombers, and they believe they'll go straight to heaven if they do this. And so a lot of the Luciferians who are Mormon think that it's their job to bring on the apocalypse, that they think that's their calling and position.
Do you think that they are seeking satanic nirvana? Have you heard of this? Where because they want to get free from the they believe that they're that they have recycled lives with the reincarnation. So they believe that they're reincarnating here again and again in this place created by the demiurge or whatever. And in order to free themselves, instead of becoming a good person like Jesus or Buddha and getting rid of all the negative karma and ascending out, they think, oh, well, I'll just be the most evil I can be. And then when this life is done, God will just toss me into the lake of fire and my existence will be no more. And to them, that's like nirvana, because they're escaping the trap in that sense, where it's like a suicide for their soul. Do you think that's why?
Well, I think that there is different beliefs in different branches within these cults, and it depends on which branch they're part of. I do think some are probably in that place. And then again, it's hard for somebody, like us, who has a pure heart. A lot of the people that I work with, they can't even fathom what's going on in their families around them and how they're being handled. I can see the signs all over, and they have a really hard time even believing it for a while until the masks are just ripped off and they make themselves known. Because for somebody with a pure heart, it's really hard to get into the mindset of the pure fuckery that goes on within the brains of these sociopathic Satanists, and so whatever, there's a multiple variation of different lies that they're told or that they will believe in order to do whatever thing that they're into. Even when I was recruited into a polyamorous cult unknowingly, when I was first learning about this, because we were taught to raise Joseph Smith up, who was a polygamist, our whole lives. And so the idea of polyamory wasn't so far-fetched to me, and so I understand a lot of the lies that they would tell themselves about why it was okay to like cheat on their own spouse for spiritual ascension. So there's an array of different lies. I know there's branches of people that are doing their work for, like my sister, for instance, she called herself an apocalypse architect. And so they believe that their job is to be the opposition. We know that we came into the
stumbling block, right?
Yeah.
To be everyone else's stumbling block.
Yeah, because God prophesied that we were going to come into a fallen world, and that we would have, if Adam and Eve ate the fruit and they fell, then obviously there would be opposition in all things. So it's their job and role. They're doing us a favor because they're doing us a favor because we couldn't ascend without an oppositional role. And so they're part of the plan.
So we couldn't take the Jesus path if there wasn't all of this strife and stumbling blocks in our way.
You wouldn't have anything to be saved from if we didn't oppress you. So we're going to be saved too.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So there are literally people that are preaching all will be saved. And I've seen it in multiple different paths.
So regular people have one set of morality that they have to follow. But the Satanists, they're like, we don't have to follow that set because we're helping this guy over here. So like that morality applies to you, and that's why you will ascend or go down. But for us, we're like not even playing that game. We're on a different, there is no morality here, and there is no judgment on my side. I just win every time,
I just have to counterbalance my bad deeds with good deeds, which is
like Jimmy Savile, like how evil he is. He was like Roman Catholic. He would go to mass every day, and all the good deeds that he did, like with the raising money for children and all that. But then he would like rape the kids. He would talk about, like at the end of like the tally, he would talk about it like it's on a scale. And then you look at how good he did for people, and then you think about, whoa, look how bad he did. I mean, he was like raping corpses and like all this.
I mean, that's an absolute macrocosm example of the microcosm of all levels that it happens within these brotherhoods, because literally within mysticism and Freemason mysticism, they believe that their evil deeds are counterbalanced by good deeds. And so if I have to go out and I'm sent to, handle somebody and have sex with them and cheat on my wife in order to keep this woman in line, then as long as I give her some money tomorrow and help her, and give her cheap rent so that she has a roof over her head, that counterbalances me handling her. Wow. So that's where you get really messed up with a lot of these women who are being handled by Freemasons, is they're doing a lot of good for you. They're helping you. They provided you a place to live at a discounted rate. They're not even making anything. Why would they do that? Why would they do that?
Right.
If it's too good to be true, it probably is. And usually it's because they're counterbalancing their evil deeds with good deeds. And so, absolutely, there's also a level of, well, how do I explain this? So in their mindset, there's a level of, if I do so much evil, and I have to, and we'll go back to like keeping your mouth closed and the oaths with why they do the bestiality and the entrance of a deaf, dumb spirit. But if I have to keep secrets for this secret society, that's really hard. It's really hard for us to not be able to speak anything true. So that's why you find a lot of them talking about other things, like
projecting
a lot of
it on other things, right? Okay.
Well, a lot of people who are within, a lot of the double agents or like controlled disclosure people who are still in the Illuminati, but they're speaking out or saying they're a survivor and they're still in it. It's really freeing to project it into another branch, like my mom, for instance. I'll use her as an example. My mom, from when I was young, taught me a lot about the Illuminati and how it functions within the government. the US government and how all of our presidents were dealing drugs from Air Force One and how they were all pedophiles, while she's in Mormonism on a different plane and a different scale. So she had like diarrhea of the mouth about all of these things, and I couldn't figure out why my family was so irritated with her talking about this stuff all the time to me. Because they were under it just in another sect, like we talked about, she's under that branch of Illuminati and Mormonism, but she felt it was freeing for her to talk about it in another area and to be able to reveal what's really going on. And I believe it was a subconscious cry for help as well.
Right. And I'm sure they revel in the hate. I mean, like if you listen to a lot of their speech and their thoughts and how they operate, they like hate. It's good to express it, for they feel good expressing their hatred. And like, if she can apply that, and if she hates herself too for being in it, she can express that hatred out. It's very interesting.
On the others around her, because you can see it in the mirror of, somebody in a more extreme version of something that you're involved in, maybe just in a different way or to a little bit lesser degree, because, they're running the whole world and we're only handling the small group of people within our bloodline or our family. And so it doesn't click to them. And it is part of the brokenness of a sociopathic mind and a narcissist. But, also there's a whole other draw into it that's attractive and appealing that keeps them in it, which they're usually sex cults. And so there's a lot of sex.
Right.
And when you're addicted to sex,
pleasure. Right. And they get addicted to the blood, the adrenalized blood, and not just adrenaline, but all kinds of, endogenous drugs because humans are drugs. People create drugs internally. And if they can siphon that, then they use humans as drugs, as food, as organ trade, like the organ trade and the sex trade. Really, like there's a Marilyn Manson song where I talked about that on my show like a few weeks ago, and one of the lines were, "Cash is a poor man's money." That's true. They deal in people. Like, this is really, and that's why all the trafficking, that's why the jesters have all these vans that go to Mexico. Like, that's why they're bringing up undocumented children from Mexico and just like placing them in families with like, they're not families. They're like, anyway. So
and within Mormonism, where you see that is, I'll talk about the organ trade, but I also want to mention one of the greatest addictions that's a drug for men in Freemasonry is power. And the power that they can have over another individual when they're given an opportunity to handle somebody, and because it's a hierarchy structure,
right.
The handlers are being handled. There's the handlers of the handlers of the handlers.
Yeah.
And so if you're handling somebody else, but you're being handled, it's so much more freeing because, well, I'm being handled over here in force, but then I'm controlling over here. So you give somebody
the police, just like the cops, they smack our heads because it's like somebody could, like a guy that gets yelled at work, he goes home and he kicks the dog.
You give somebody a dose of power and they absolutely get off on it. And those cops, it's what I saw with, I could see, because it was like my veil was ripped off, all the cops that dealt with me. And there was 2 different police departments, 12 officers strong, 6 police cars, just to check on a missing person who was found missing for a week. And they were all sodomites. And they hated me because I wanted to be free of all of that. They had an innate hate
because
for me.
You were getting free and they can't be free.
Yes.
Right.
And so they, and they also hate themselves, and they also hate what they're in. And it's part of the process of me having been an expendable, how easy it was to be treated by an expendable for others, because this is one of the ways God took me in, taught me how to forgive them, was because they hated me. Why did they hate me? Not because I did anything to them, not because I was a bad person.
They don't know you.
They hated me. My family, all my friends growing up, the reason it was easy for them to treat me that way, they hated me because I didn't have to do dark rituals like they were doing. I wasn't made to do all of the wicked things that they were made to do. So I got to live this life of like not doing evil. And I don't even know if that's conscious for them, but it's definitely subconscious, and it definitely made it easier, for them. So yeah, within the police force, I saw that they're like crazy. They had no problem just handing it out and dishing it out, miles high to me, and even to the prosecuting attorney. He can't stand me. I can't stand to look at him either. Like I can look at his mouth and feel his sodomy from a mile away while he's in there, just hating on me, wanting to destroy me and see my children lost, writing pages and pages of lies about me, stuff that's not even in the police reports, just to mess up my case so bad, to try to stick it to me, which at the end of the day is going to be
that should be a crime. I mean, he should go to jail for that.
And that's what I'm doing right now is I'm writing up, I'm fighting my own case. And so I'm writing all of this in a motion to dismiss my case because of the police corruption. And I'm making it really, it's hard because that's the one thing they wanted to do is shut me up and give me a gatekeeper attorney. And even though I was super pissed when my attorney quit, God came in real quick and was like, no, this is the biggest blessing you can have because now you can tell the truth and the whole story.
Right.
Where
now it's your mouth.
And there was stuff she wouldn't say, she just wouldn't say it. She wouldn't bring up how they stole $50,000 cash out of my truck, for the entire, I've been in this for 2 years fighting this, and she just wouldn't say a lot of stuff. So I'm putting it all out there now and in my document. But also going back to what you said about organ trade, the organ trade,
right,
is that's a huge thing within Mormonism, because if you go to for instance, growing up, my parents, some of their good friends were, he was a mortician, and he owned all of the local, what do you call the places where they
funeral homes?
Funeral homes, yeah. And I've been having, visionary dreams still about all these families from my childhood, because God's just showing me. He's like, okay, they spied on you. Now I'm going to let you know what they're doing. And so he's taken me all the way back to my peoplehood, people I haven't thought about since I was 7, and shown me who they are in this whole thing. And my nephew, he was a heroin addict since he was 14. His aunt got him hooked on heroin. And he ended up dying the last year when I was still around with my family. And that was one of the things that really set my family off with me. Was I started asking questions about his death, because my sister, who was a witch, who was living with me and spying on me, she told me not to, because I didn't talk to my family much. So I was always getting information from my sister and my brother. I just couldn't really stand them anymore, and I didn't know why. And I just knew they were, not conducive in my life. So I stayed clear as much as I could before I really took off. But they were always kind of in the background, like texting about me, and I was getting information. But my nephew, he came to see me a week before he died. And my sister-in-law kept telling me like, oh, Christopher really wanted to see you before he passed away. And he kept saying that he, call Charissa, I want to get my hair cut. And so he came over for a haircut, and I almost feel like he knew he was going to die. I don't know if he knew consciously, but I wonder if he knew. And I feel like he was probably a sacrifice. And I don't know if he was talking out or if he just knew or what happened there. But he was, and I don't know if he did talk, and maybe he was under some kind of punishment, but he just sat in my chair and told me, I wish I would have never done heroin. I wish I would have only ever just smoked weed and just paid attention to my kid and my wife and kept to myself, me and my dog and my kid and my wife, and now I know why he's saying that, because that's what I had to end up doing when I left it. Like, I don't talk to anybody. I live my own life. I don't talk to the last person I tried to talk to here, her name was Dragon. And I found out she's a CIA agent sent to spy on me in my own apartment complex. So I just don't talk to people, period. When you've been in one of these bloodline families, you got to isolate if you want to get out of it. And a lot of people are too codependent in their friendships and then in their relationships to get out from under their handlers. So he was, just telling me, I wish this, I wish that. And it felt like kind of a deathbed penance that he paid to me that day. And I remember him standing at my door before he left. And I was just like, if you ever need anything, I'm here for you. And he just sat and looked at me with just this longing. And when he just held this long stare at me, and then he just kind of shook his head and looked down and turned away and walked, like feeling defeated. And I didn't know at the time why, until after he died, what I was feeling, between that day. But then a week later, he was dead. Well, he was actually in the hospital on life support. And another thing my sister-in-law told me every time I went in to visit him was that he would only open his eyes when I was in the room. And we were told that, it was an overdose and something happened with his friends. And he came home that night, late at night, and he fell over and passed out in the house. And they didn't know, anything else. Well, I know he'd been trying to get clean for a while, on and off. And when his autopsy came back months later, it was like 6 months later, and I don't know why it took so long to do his autopsy. They said there was no heroin in his system, and that he had blunt force trauma to the back of his head.
Whoa.
And so, I kept going to my brother and going, why are you guys going to investigate Christopher's death? What the hell happened there? Like, what's going on? And he just didn't want to talk about it. He would divert, change the subject. He's really good at doing that and not having to be obvious. And when they put me in the hospital, I could see that was why, like, my brother was bound and determined to have me committed for like 6 to 9 months and did not want me to be set free from the hospital.
Wow.
And I think it's because they have some guilt there with whatever happened, and because I was raising up questions. So anyway, so at his funeral, I was looking at some pictures, and I realized that this man from my childhood, whose wife ran the local, it was called Sunshine Generation, and it was actually one of these little music groups that they used for kids. And the Glenn Pace papers, where he came out with the satanic panic in the 80s, where there was like over 500 victims who'd come forward and said that they were sexually abused in ritual-like fashion and incestuous fashion in these families in these neighborhoods in Sandy, which was also a man named Dick Miles, who my dad shared a locker with at the temple and was going to do some business with. And he happens to be the son-in-law of the president of the Mormon church, President Nelson. And so they're practicing generational, very obvious, like in some of the reports, like the man was having sex with his grandmother in front of these little children. Wow. So knowing that there's obvious traits of generational incest and pedophilia, like that was one of the things that really woke me up to realize, like, this is in the higher levels of the church, because this is the prophet of the church's daughter, and her husband are doing this in their neighborhood to hundreds of people. And that doesn't just happen. That's taught to you, generationally. So as soon as I understood that, I knew, like, the president of the church, he was teaching his daughter this. And so seeing the links is really important, the chain links of generational, the generational patterns. And that's what I was doing before I even left the Mormon church. I wrote a generational healing method called Spirit Code. And so I had become really aware of how to watch for those patterns. So let's see, anyway, going back to my nephew, I'm at his funeral, and this guy who I said his wife was in, this Sunshine Generation thing, my mind's putting together and pinging all of these connections. And he was the mortician running my nephew's funeral. And I hadn't seen him in years. And I realized, oh, okay, so this is a thing. And then I started having dreams and realizing that, so my parents went on a mission to Cambodia, and my dad really wanted to get called to be the mission president there. They say that positions in the Mormon church are a calling, not like, it's not a job. You're called and they ask you, but there's definitely influence behind the scenes, and it's all planned. It's not like a related. It's like, who's the Freemason who can do the position that we need him to do, even down to like your local missionaries are CIA. They're I was gang stalked by missionaries, like young 20-year-old kids, they use them to spy too. And so a lot of these senior missionaries are from these bloodline families, and they're going around the world and around the country to be mission presidents in other states. And they're setting up trafficking. So my parents were in Cambodia, and I was on the phone with my mom one day while they were on their mission. And this was years ago, but it was so crazy because she was obsessed with telling me about the Illuminati. So she was telling me something corrupt going on in the government. And all of a sudden she's talking and like it stops for a second, and then it like slows down, and it repeats the same like 3 sentences she had just said to me in like kind of a robotic voice. And I realized we were being recorded, and the recording had stopped and repeated what she had just said.
Wow.
And then it hung up. Oh. And so I was like tripping out. I called my mom back, and I was like, we were just being recorded. I just heard your voice play back, and You need to be careful what you talk about. Are you researching stuff on the internet there? Because you're being listened to. Well, what she had just been telling me before she went into this was that the local authorities in Cambodia had come to their house for 4 hours and searched everything in their entire apartment, like gone through everything. And I'm like, well, what were they looking for? Why were they there? And she's like, I don't know. And so I'm like,
probably
okay,
looking for missing children. I mean, what the?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And they took their passports, and I don't know what ended up happening. I mean, I think they confiscated them for a little while and then gave them back. But I mean, it was a pretty big deal. Highest authorities there.
Right.
So then my dad they come home, and years later, they're still friends with these other couples that they served on their mission with, and they would go to these retreats with them and stuff. And my dad is a commercial real estate developer, and is one of his give good deeds, he wanted to help Cambodia by giving them a cemetery, because they didn't have a cemetery to bury their dead. So he was going to get a piece of land and provide them a cemetery so they could bury their dead. They're into organ trade. That's all that was about.
So they take the organs before they put them in the ground, or what? I mean, I guess they have to take the organs while they're alive.
Well, you think about his friend who ran. I don't know how they would do it in Cambodia, the details of the exact how it works behind the scenes. But his friend who's a mortician who ran my nephew's funeral, he's embalming bodies. Like, one of my best friends, her husband does the same thing. When she got married to this guy, she went in and she was able to watch a cremation. And she's like, I wish I never would have watched that. It was the most traumatizing thing I've ever seen. And the dude was like 400 pounds. And I just had to sit there and watch all of his fat melt down. And it was like the grossest thing ever. And, but even these people who go into these positions intentionally because they can access blood, flesh,
right,
organs.
Just like the hospitals, right? Exactly.
And one of the reasons they need those in Mormon Egyptian magic is because they use the organs for a specific type of, I can't remember the term, but there's a specific type of medicine that they use in witchcraft that's made with human organs. I
see. So it doesn't have to be a living organ, because they're just going to process. It's not going to go into another body.
No, they use it for witchcraft or multiple other dark purposes that we can't even fathom. Who knows?
Dean Martin, from the Rat Pack or whatever, was on with the Tonight Show, and he was drunk, and I don't know if it was an act or whatever, but Johnny Carson's talking about Christmas or something, and Dean Martin is talking about how it's really tough. How do you wrap a gland? He's going to give a gland as a gift, but he doesn't know how to wrap it in wrapping paper. And everybody's like, ha, 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 ha. But maybe that's what he was really doing, is giving people glands. What are they chewing on them? Are they making them, doing magic with them? Who knows, and this was on live TV.
Yeah. Yeah. They tell you a lot of stuff they're doing, and they throw it out there because they know you're just going to laugh at it and not get it and not understand how nefarious what they're saying really is. And they get off on that stuff, and that's where, once you this handbook that I've written, that's what happened to me is I wrote this prayer of sovereignty, and it literally changed something in my brain and in the spirit. So that the next day when I woke up, all of a sudden my whole life was pinging things that had been said by people in my family.
All
the Freudian slips, all the Freudian slips, all of it. They tell on themselves all the time. They tell on other people. My siblings would tell me what so-and-so was doing or what so-and-so was doing, because there's something freeing in tattletelling on. I see this all the time within the systems, the satanic systems, and in these cults and Freemasonry. They tell on other people all the time, because there's a level of being allowed to do a controlled disclosure in order to build rapport with somebody. And so they'll tell you what their buddy's doing, but they won't tell you they're in on it and that they're a part of it. And these things just started going off in my head, and I realized I had a whole slew of a lifetime worth of evidence from themselves,
Right.
But to kind of go back to Joseph Smith and this Book of Mormon part to lay that ground to go,
Please.
okay, who are the Mormons? So the next verse says, "For the time cometh, saith the Lamb of God, that I will work a great and a marvelous work among the children of men, a work which shall be everlasting, either on one hand or the other, either to the convincing of them unto peace and life eternal, or unto the deliverance unto them of the hardness of their hearts and the blindness of their minds, unto being brought down into captivity, and also into destruction, both temporally and spiritually, according to the captivity of the devil, of which I have spoken." So the people within the church are thinking, oh, this is for the sinners outside of the Mormon church, when really this is speaking to the people who are running their own church, who are providing this book to them.
Right.
They're speaking their own fate. "And it came to pass that he said unto me, Look, and I look, and behold, that great and abominable church, which is the mother of abominations, whose founder is the devil. And he said unto me, Behold, there are save 2 churches only, and one is the church of the Lamb of God, and the other is the church of the devil," which I do believe is true. "Wherefore, whoso belongeth not to the church of the Lamb belongeth to the great church, which is the mother of abominations, and she is the whore of all the earth. And it came to pass that I beheld the church of the Lamb of God, and its numbers were few, because of the wickedness and abominations of the whore, who sat upon many waters. Nevertheless, I beheld that the church of the Lamb, who were the saints of God, were also upon all the face of the earth, and their denominations upon the face of the earth were small, because of the wickedness of the great whore whom I saw. And it came to pass that I beheld that the great mother of abominations did gather together multitudes upon the face of the earth among all nations of the Gentiles to fight against the Lamb of God." And this is exactly what their Illuminati involvement is within the Mormon church.
Right.
And it came to pass, and it came to pass that I, Nephi, beheld the power of the Lamb of God, that it descended upon the saints of the church of the Lamb, and upon the covenant people of the Lord, who were scattered upon the face of all of the earth, and they were armed with righteousness and with the power of God in great glory. And it came to pass that I beheld the wrath of God was poured out upon that great and abominable church, insomuch that there were wars and rumors of wars among all of the nations and kindreds of the earth. And this is their involvement in the one world order.
Right.
And when the day cometh that the wrath of God is poured out upon the mother of harlots, which I have seen in vision several times, is coming to their own selves, which is the great and abominable church of all of the earth, whose founder is the devil, then at that day the work of the Father shall commence in preparation for the fulfilling of his covenants, which he hath made to his people who are of the house of Israel. Wherefore the things which he shall write are just and true, and behold, they are written in a book, which thou beheld proceeding out of the mouth of the Jew. And at that time they proceeded out of the mouth of a Jew, or at the time the book proceeded out of the mouth of the Jew, which things which were written, which were plain and pure and most precious and easy to the understanding of all men. So this is interesting because let's see. So in this last verse, it talks about this destruction that's coming over essentially their own self. And then when it talks about this Jew, there's also a scripture in the Book of Mormon or in the Bible that talks about those who say they are Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan.
Right.
And so there's a lot of interesting mindfuckery in this, because a lot of it's true, but it's with a twist, and they're talking about themselves. And the interesting thing is that so the Church of Satan in the Satanic Bible, it says that they have to tell you what they are doing. It's one of the rules. In order for them to do an evil and a wicked thing to you, in order for them to be able, they think that they are washing their hands of it, because if they tell you that they're doing, satanic evil things, and then you choose it anyway, then that's your fault. That's on you. Right. My karma, my hands are clean.
That's why the cigarette pack tells you this will cause cancer. And if you buy it, it's your fault. Right. So,
yeah. And even with, the shot,
right. Yeah. Well, they don't actually give informed consent with that thing.
But on the government
They did
website, before it even was distributed, they did come out with all of a list of the ingredients. And if you went and researched the ingredients, you knew that they were.
I didn't know about the ingredient. I know that they did say that that like it's. I mean, anyway, I mean, I've done a bunch of shows about how it's a culling, and it's you know, that whole rollout is eugenics, and you know, it's genocide, basically. So like, you know, my listeners are all on board. They understand that this, because I mean they want to, I mean, it's a harvest of souls too, you know.
Yeah.
And if you're dumb enough to believe that, then you aren't even considered an awake human. Like, you are like still a beast if you don't have an awake and aware consciousness. And so like, and they use symbols, they occult things, like they still kind of, technically, according to them, they told us about it, but you know, like 9/11 and stuff, and like Pearl Harbor, and like all these things were like, we should have known it was going to happen, and what, you know. But anyway,
Well, yeah, they definitely prophesy their own dirty work.
Right.
You can find it all over, and whatever nefarious stuff they're doing, they usually tell it somewhere to a degree. And there's usually somewhere on even government websites where you can go look up their own Satanism written in some other, but nobody goes and reads it. That's the whole point, is it's there, but they know you're not going to go read it. And so they can do what they're going to do. And then they think, well, you know, it's not our fault. You did that to yourself.
And that way it does, the karmic results don't hinder their ascension in their own soul progression.
They believe
direction
what
they're
Satan
going.
tells them. Right. Yes, which is what they believe that Satan tells them, which is obviously not true. But this is what you see taking place within this passage, is that the Mormons are telling you who they are. And one of the things that's interesting is because it's a Nephilim religion, and they're revealing, you know, okay, these fallen angels, we're the church of the whore of all the earth. We're a great and abominable church. And it was developed directly from the devil himself. And, you know, and then they tell you they're doing absolute wickedness to other people at a great level. And so, you know, within the Mormon church, from the highest echelons, so the way the structure and hierarchy of the Mormon church is, there's the prophet, and then he has two general authorities that are the now what is it that they call it? It's been so long. I can't remember now what they call it. Gosh, it's been so long since I talked about Mormonism.
It's like a supernal triad, basically, right? You got the
and they
top the pyramid, and then the two below him, and so that, okay.
And they claim, they tout that they're patterning the same structure that Jesus had when he was on the earth. That's what they believe, or lie and say.
Jesus told us that we have free will and to choose with our hearts and stuff. And meanwhile, we're creating a structure of obedience, and Jesus, just like the Pope on top, and the, you know, cardinals, all that. It's like I said, if you see a structure of obedience, then there you'll find Satan, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but when you're born into it, you have no idea, because it's all you know, and you're usually pretty isolated and sheltered in that structure of beliefs, and so you don't even realize that, even though you have a Bible sitting there, that the Bible says, you know, that God does not. God's spirit is not found in temples made with human hands. Yet you go to these big, huge idols all over the world and think that you're doing, you know, work for the dead there. And the Bible also talks about necromancy, and when the dead are dead, they're dead. And so that there's this whole structure of keeping people connected to these curses of their generations, connecting to them to dead spirits, the demonic, and then also a whole other level of the Nephilim, which the Nephilim spirits, the hybrid spirits that influence and connect, and especially being run by Nephilim bloodlines. I believe that the hierarchy of the Mormon church is run by Nephilim hybrid bloodlines. And that is why that they are so obsessed with, you know, having these underground tunnels and stuff in order to feed the beast, because they're involved in cannibalism, the Nephilim were obsessed with incest. And in Mormonism, the incest is insane, off the charts, to the point where I had a client when I was cutting hair who he was a geneticist, and he worked in genetic studies, and his main office was in Salt Lake City. And so I was laughing because he knew that I used to be Mormon, and I was like, well, that's interesting. Why did they set up there when their headquarters are here, but one of their main, offices is there? And I said, I didn't even ask him. I just said, well, probably because it's easy to study, genetics. I think it was a cancer research. I said, there's so many disorders and health issues with the people in Utah because of
the inbreeding.
Yeah. And he kind of giggled, and he looked at me like he didn't realize I was going to know that, but he knew exactly why his company had chosen that to be the place that they go and test all these people.
Isn't it also that the Mormon church, takes everybody's genetics, and they file it and catalog, and they look at everybody's bloodlines and stuff.
Well, they
I know they baptize the dead and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's an excuse for it. But they're gathering all this genetic information of everybody, right?
Yeah. So the Mormon Church owns the largest library of genealogy in the world. Like, even if an African American wants to find their ancestry and their bloodline, the Mormon Church owns all of their genealogical files. And it's hidden in this big, huge mountain up in, it might be Nephi, Utah. I can't remember the name of the city. And this big, huge rock. They have this big door over it. It's kind of crazy if you go look at the pictures of it online, but it's just files and files. And that just showed they're obsessed with bloodlines, because it's an Illuminati church. Right. And so, Mormons push, one of my last callings before I left the church was they called me to be a genealogist, which I didn't even really know how to use their computer system, but they were kind of started training me. Mm-hmm. And they want everybody to be listed in there and who their ancestry is, so they can mark exactly who you descended from, so they know what bloodline you descend from. Right. And so my brother one day was super excited about having this big family meeting where he called us all together and showed us all of our ancestry. He had gone and taken it all the way back to Henry the Third or something in England. And so he was like, we're royalty. And I think that, that's what my brothers use to tout their bloodline in Freemasonry, because my dad was trying to get a higher calling in the Mormon church, because the higher your calling,
just trying to get a promotion, basically.
Oh yeah. So anyway, it's all pretty crazy, but that's just to kind of set a foundation. We're pretty far in. So just to kind of give you an idea what Mormonism is in the structure and why they had the power to do to me what they did. So as soon as I wrote Papers of Sovereignty, after I realized that maritime moving to land jurisdiction maybe wasn't the answer, because this lady, Anna von Reitz, was also a Jesuit, and what I realized later is that land jurisdiction was just as run by Satanists as maritime.
It's like another dialectic, right? To catch you in.
Yeah.
Right.
And the important thing to understand biblically speaking on this is 1 Samuel 8, because like you were talking about early, we're not supposed to be under a governing body of a hierarchy. And that's laid out in that verse, because that was when Samuel, the people started asking for a king, and they were begging Samuel for a king. And Samuel's like, why do you want a king? Do you not understand that you have a God, and at Jesus, you have that's all you need. And they wanted a man to be their king. And so he was just mourning this whole asking of the people. And he went to God and he was like, God, these people, they want a king. And God said, Samuel, don't be sad. They're not mad at you. They didn't deny you. They denied me. And so that was essentially the initiation of slavery on the earth, when man himself imprisoned himself by asking to have a flesh man come between him and his own God, his creator, and by choice. And so God said, okay, you're going to give it to them because they asked for it. So
And it
now,
still continues today, every 2 to 4 years, when people go into a voting booth and they're like, give me a master, as they check on
yeah.
the dotted line. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's when it's a great read for anybody. Go pick up the Bible and read 1 Samuel 8, because you will see the curses that you are now under a presidential governing system, because he says, okay, you're going to give it to them, but this is what's going to happen. They're going to take your best men and your best women, your beautiful sons and your daughters, and they're going to make them, drive their horses and buggies, and the king's going to make them, make his perfumes and be confectionaries. And it's going to essentially raise him up so that he's amazing and great and has all of these slaves. Everything that he outlines is a slave system of their own people, and that they would be taken out of their own fields. He's going to take your own property. He's going to take all of your cattle. He's going to build, big, huge chariots. And all right, that's what's going to happen. So that's what you want. Here you go. And he laid it out and told them, and they were like, okay.
Wow.
Let's do that.
Now those people that have those, are brought up high. They're drinking blood. They're sacrificing. They're organ trading. They're giving glands as gifts, and we still put them on a pedestal. We still go in that voting booth and say, yeah, give me that one.
Well, and I didn't even fully understand what was going on when I quit voting, years ago, before I even fully understood the hierarchical structure of the government. I just knew that you're giving me two options, and I don't like either of them. I don't like either of them, and I don't.
Yeah.
I had written an energy healing method, so I understood spiritual contracts. Okay, I understood that when you say yes to something, or when you even give money or donate to something, you're essentially buying into whatever it is that's behind that thing.
Right.
And so I was just like, I don't like either of you, and I'm not going to choose either of you. So I'm just going to write in Jesus. And literally, when I was still married to my ex Freemason husband, who's on the left-handed path, I went in and he was just like, you're so stupid. I said, I just wrote in Jesus Christ. I can't
that was
buy
the smartest
one of those
thing you
people.
could do. Because you are not, it takes really it's kind of a little bird walk, but really this is the act of choosing to vote is choosing to be slave and choosing to allow the masters to do whatever they want. And then when they go bomb a country, it's our fault. We have to feel bad for it because, we chose them. It's totally skirting karma, and it's allowing destruction of humanity. And people,
that's all.
Yeah,
that's all voting is you signing away your soul to sign on the bloody line to say yes. Eat our children. Yes. Poison our food. Yes, drink our blood. That's what you're saying when you vote. And that's who the people are that you're voting for. And you're being forced into choosing the lesser of two evils. Well, so according to the play you put on the stage, because you're all just a bunch of puppeteers and actors, so it's not even real, And I because my mom had, and I was so mad at my mom for a long time, of course, but I've become really grateful for her diarrhea of the mouth, because she taught me so much about, to be aware of what was happening in other systems outside of Mormonism, to the point that I was able to recognize it within Mormonism. And so I was able to, check out early, years ago, I still had young babies. It was probably 7 or 8 elections ago. I was like, no, I'm not. And then that broke one level of my generational curses. And then I went and, wrote energy healing and did a whole bunch of specific generational curse, work. And then I went and I wrote papers of sovereignty, and that broke the spell over my mind so that I could see what was going on around me. And then I went and I wrote, a 63-page handbook to free myself and others from all of the 7 mountains of culture, which we lost our birthrights to when we were born, when they cut our cord.
Can you tell the listeners where they can find these works that you've written?
Yeah. So my handbook is free. So essentially what it is I had to quit my job because I became aware that when I left, I still got to go back and start at the beginning of my story with what happened to me, but we'll kind of start at the end and then go back.
Okay.
But I had to quit my job because I realized I was working for Freemasons and witches who were setting me up at work. Like they weren't even putting my name in the system as if I was working that day to be cutting hair, so clients couldn't find me because it's like a online system for appointments.
Right.
And so I had a series of dreams and visions and realized what was going on at work, and I ended up quitting before they fired me because they were trying to weed me out. And so I was jobless with no income, and they stole $50,000 of my savings out of my truck, and I had spent the last of my money on trying to get an attorney to get my kids back. So I was just like broke. And that's what these Freemasons do to you, is they want that, take you out with the finances, and then you can't function. And so if you can't function, you can't talk, you can't tell the truth, you can't get justice, you can't wage a war against them. You're just in survival mode. And so I trying to figure out what to do, I was just led and started having, dreams and visions. And I just would sit in my bed for months every day and write prayers of deliverance, breaking free from all of these systems. And then once I got set free and God showed me how to go get on government assistance, which I never would have done in the past. And until I broke out from under those systems, I couldn't have done it, because we don't really fully understand how the Illuminati also works behind the scenes in the spirit, because there are principalities that are working in the spirit against us. There's the Nephilim, that are working against us. There's the demonic, there's Satan, there's Lucifer. They have a whole hierarchy, just like God has a hierarchy. And they're, working within the government. And so if I wouldn't have broke those curses first and went into the government asking for help, I couldn't have been fully honest about my situation. I would have them, because they flag you, all over the place. But because I broke those curses first, it set me free. In the spiritual, I went before the throne of God and I demanded justice, because it wasn't going to happen to a judge here. I saw the corruption. I couldn't get custody of my kids. I had charges against me. I could see they were all slimy serpent, Nephilim hybrids running the system. And so there's no answers. What am I supposed to? It's okay. There's no answers. There's no solutions. And this is a hard one, because I work with a lot of moms who've lost custody of their kids, and I'm an advocate on Instagram for this kind of stuff, and I watch and follow a lot of other people who are advocates for this, and it breaks my heart because they don't have working solutions. They're out there picketing on the porch of the whatever, and it's like, they're not going to change the laws, and there's already laws in place to protect these things from happening. But they don't care. They don't keep their own laws.
Right.
They've gone rogue, and they're doing whatever they want, and they can, because they're superior and they're superior and they're superior. They're all Satanists. So they don't care. They want your kids. That's what they want, is they want your kids. And CPS and the family court is like the most messed up system, and they're just literally feeding kids to the beast through these systems. So you defect from a bloodline family, and all they have to do is come and take your kids away. And that's what they're doing like crazy. And the only way out from underneath that, a lot of people are like, well, I'm just going to tell my story. And it's like, you can tell your story all day. It's not going to set you free in the spirit. You got to go get set free in the spirit and break your curses and your spells on your bloodline. And then God comes in and shows up and shows you how to take care of it, because we're in contract with the devil, literally, like on this land. And in many other countries, I'm working with the lady who's doing my handbook reading right now, Angela Power Disney, and she's in Ireland, and she's going through the same stuff. So it doesn't matter what country you're in, it's the same thing all over the planet. We're in end times. Bible doesn't prophesy we're going to make America great again. Like, it's not happening. So getting set free in the spirit is through sovereignty and making your declarations. Right. Huge. That did massive things for me when I sat in my bed and wrote all of these prayers out by hand. And then once I did it and saw how to do it and went and got on government assistance, so that I wasn't being provided for by my ex-husband, by corrupt Freemason witches at work, didn't have money coming in through dirty hands. Of course, the money that I get from the government is still dirty, but God has anointed it for me.
Thanks for saying that. Okay, that's good. I'm glad you were taken care of. That's important. So that's
yeah. So he set me up and said, now you work for me, and gave me the name Attorney at Yah, and said, now you go out and fight for me, and I'm the judge, and I'm your ruler, and I'm your king, and I'm your master. And so I ended up taking all of those prayers that I had written in my own journal and depersonalizing them and writing them in a general form and putting them into a digital handbook that I just email people for free. They can just go email me at attorney at Yah, Y-A-H, the first three letters of Yahweh, and attorney@yah@gmail.com. And if you email me there, then I'll just email you a copy and you just sit down and you read the handbook. And I also am doing a live reading of the handbook right now with Angela Power Disney. So you can go to her YouTube channel. It's just Angela Power Disney. It might be Angie Power Disney. I can't remember if she uses her full name or her. And then we're doing a live reading, and right now we're up to 5 episodes. We're on about page 29. It's a 63-page handbook. We're doing like a interactive reading of the handbook, getting her set free from a lot of this stuff too. And I also just started my own YouTube channel, which will eventually end up on Rumble and possibly Odyssey as well.
Odyssey is great. That one's my favorite.
Okay,
go ahead.
Good to know.
Yeah,
So that's what you're on, right?
Yeah, I'm on Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble. I also have a YouTube, but all I post is like anti-circumcision stuff there. I don't put anything that's like, conspiracy or something that will get censored, but that's the one topic that everybody has to know. It's like, that's an evil ritual. Don't do it to your kids, that type of thing. So I put that on YouTube so everybody can see it.
Okay, nice.
But anyway, go ahead.
So we're going to continue those readings. We're going to, keep going this week. We're on top of it. She's putting them out weekly.
Great.
And so you can listen to it live. My story and just the intro and all that's a good place to listen to it live. But I encourage people to actually speak them with your own mouth. When God created the earth, he spoke the word, and we are given a tongue and a mouth for a reason. And when we actually speak there, all these prayers that I wrote, Holy Spirit would come in that day and be like, you need to read this out loud. You wrote it in the book, but you need to sit down and now read it to me. And I would literally sit in my bed in my room, and I would imagine that I'm in the throne of God, and I could feel it. It's like here I am in the throne room of God, and I'm sitting before God, and I'm reading my declarations and my claims, because God does run a just court system. It's the only place you're going to find a just court system is on the throne of God. He has a higher structure. Like Jesus Christ is the Lord of hosts. Who are the hosts? The hosts are the governing body systems of the angelic realms that govern and serve justice on the earth.
Right.
And so when Jesus returns, he came not to bring peace. He came with a sword. Right. And so we're promised vengeance to our enemies. And so, I'm going and getting in fights with God. Like, I was pissed. And so let me go back now and start at my story, because when I saw what they were able to do to me, I was livid, because I was like, I taught an energy healing gift based on the illumination of spiritual gifts. So I knew all about spiritual gifts, and I knew some very gifted people who had all, because I would go to these conferences that were all, healers, who all had all different kinds of gifts. I was meeting psychics who would do readings for me. I think when it dropped out,
writing
I
down
don't know.
and speaking out the words and how important it is to speak. And in my podcast, I've talked with ex-Satanists who talk about how important it is to speak words and to have truth, because that's like everything comes from our mind first, and like your actions are a secondary thing. But if your words are connected right to the mind, and you can affect other people's minds before they act, it's like a much more magical process. So I have talked about the importance of speech. And so
and that's
coming from you too. It's great.
Yeah. In the book of Enoch actually, there's a passage where he says, like, God didn't intend for man to, write down everything, like to learn that way. And that was actually because the book of Enoch was actually written by the angels. He said the angels were writing everything that he was going through. Like, he didn't even write his own record. It was written by the angels. And there's angelic ministers that are to keep, their assignment is to keep records. And he says man was given a mouth and a tongue that he should speak.
Right.
And, we don't use that properly. And one of the interesting things about these cults and these bloodlines is, like I was talking about earlier, is they use the bestiality or the dentistry or magic, different ways they enmesh deaf, dumb spirits into our soul. And I don't know if a lot of people realize like the purpose of the bestiality rituals is there because animals can't speak. And so when you enmesh an animal spirit with a human, especially in a traumatic way, when they go to try to reveal or talk about the things that are done to them in the rituals in which they were forced to perform bestiality rituals, they can't talk. They literally like cannot speak. And a lot of the people that I work with, who are survivors who are speaking out right now, when the witches come on attack for them, what they feel is like compression of the throat, like they're being choked. Wow. And I think that's why they call us into the dentist every 6 months, because I think they're reinitiating the sorcery behind these rituals of shutting us up. And so really being able to speak out, even when I'm just in the shower saying a prayer on my own, like talking to God or like claiming something for my life, I'm really trying to get better at practicing, not just doing it in my head, but even just speaking out in my prayers.
Right. That's great. That's beautiful. So you've written out and you named it sovereignty. So this is really how to get free of everything, is to claim your own sovereignty. I mean, God gave us free will. We choose what we do with our body. My hands are mine. My words are mine. No one can make me. I mean, they can kill me or whatever, but I choose what I do. So like that is a gift, and that's what all beings have. Even the animals with no words, they still control their bodies. They have free will, so the domination of others is like obviously the evil. So anyway, your sovereignty, you claiming sovereignty, they can't dominate you. Right?
So the book is called Breaking Free of Satanic Luciferian Beast Systems of the Earth, Warrior Training. And so it's essentially teaching you how to pray, how to come before the throne of God, how to structure the prayers, because it's tricky learning. We have like, I really learned a lot about how to do that by my brother, who is an attorney, and having to have gone through several court cases already, and understanding the courts of the earth is what helped me to understand, the courts of God. And
Right.
So being able to go and present my case as an intercessor, using Jesus Christ as my intercessor, which he is for all of us, and accessing those available tools is incredibly powerful. And it's not just claiming your own sovereignty. God is sovereign. We are under spells and curses that steal our sovereignty, but God is the sovereignty of God is above the sovereignty of humans. So even though we are we do have free will, we can either be a slave to Satan or a servant to God. So free will is kind of tricky, because even if you're not a slave to God, it was hard for me because I'm a freedom fighter. So what freedom is, and true freedom isn't do as thou wilt. That is actually Freemasonry. That's satanic. Do as thou wilt. It also doesn't entail the laws in the Bible. And those are what keep us protected from being put under satanic curses.
We're still recording, and I'm glad.
So the last thing I heard you say was the next part of that is love. What?
Love is the law. Love under will. Like, it's two statements, and like love, people are like, oh, love under will, but love is the basis structure that will is built upon. So like without the love there, the will has nothing. So like if you love and you're doing what you care, and you care about serving God instead of doing what thou wilt, like the Satanists take the do what thou wilt and they apply that to their beast nature, and they're like, oh, my body wants sex and drugs and like whatever. So that's how they skewed it in the popular like in the 60s and stuff, they only showed that part. They didn't really show that the love is the law. Like there's what Crowley was saying was like it's not good or bad. Like some of it is bad, like talking about sacrificing kids and shit or whatever, and like how he kills a cat is bad. But like the channeled thing from the pyramid, the statement anyway, love is the law, love under will, that I find that to be true. Like what people care about for real in their heart, that's what they do in the world. And if they set their care on a good thing, then they can go to the good way, and they can like Jesus was doing what he willed. He was following his love, right? And that's what brought him to that, well, anyway.
Yes. And the tricky part about that is I was doing a lot of that, and I still opened doors because I was going on a path. I left religion, and I was like understanding religion isn't the way, and that there's corruption in religion. And so it was like, okay, well, I'm a healer, so how can I help others heal outside, of religion? And so I wrote Energy Healing Method, which I actually did while I was still Mormon, which was quite a few years before I left religion. But I started going into shamanism and earth medicines and sitting in indigenous circles of healing. And it's really crazy because only even up to last week am I realizing the implications of that in my own life and how that was opening doors. Because, like, for instance, last week, I just found out that a guy that I used to sit in combo ceremonies with regularly, that I got to know pretty well, he was just had more charges brought against him in Utah. For
in this latest thing that's happening with the children.
For sexual ritual abuse. I don't know which latest thing you're talking about. He specifically had charges brought against him. His name is
please tell.
His name is David Hamblin.
Wow.
And I had a guy reach out to me who's a journalist who said, we had a whole conversation just about my story and other victims that he's trying to expose Satanism in the church in Utah.
I'm reading all about that. Like I'm following the story as it unfolds, and the
David,
the David Hamblin, and the other the government gentleman, I forget his name, not gentleman. He goes to the press and he's like, "I'm not a cannibal. Me and my wife aren't cannibals," and everybody's like, "Huh?" And he, because his name was in this like document, and all that is unfolding. Very intelligent investigative journalist named Derek Brose, who was just 2 nights ago on my other podcast, Black Pill Digest. He is looking deep into this Utah situation, and people can learn more about it on theconsciousresistance.com. You can find his articles also on thelast.americanvagabond.com. He's published articles about exposing all about David Hamblin and what is like documented in the law and how they're following this case. This is very interesting that please.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about this until like last week. And I realized, so this guy, Sam, that reached out to me, he's a journalist and he's written some of the articles on him. And I realized a few weeks ago when I first got in touch with him, he'd sent me an article, but I didn't recognize the picture of David initially just because it was a mugshot. And then when I read his name in a separate article, it hit me and I was like, I know a David Hamblin. Who is that? And I thought for a minute, it took me a minute. I was like, that was that big, huge dude I used to sit in combo ceremonies with.
Wow.
And he sexually abused many of his clients. He was a psychologist or psychiatrist. I don't know exactly which, but and so I got connected to his story and I was like tripping that I know this guy. And the person who connected me with him said, I have all of his daughter's testimony. And some of the people his victims' testimonies. So they were sent to me, and they're like 54 pages of detailed reports of the satanic church that he was a part of. I sat in a peyote ceremony with this guy. He served me peyote.
Wow.
David Hamblin, if you're receiving indigenous medicine from a Satanist, like, and guess what? Their hands are all over. Those are the people who are being trained up in the Illuminati. That's what I was talking about earlier. The Wiccan Society in Utah, they were all sent in by my family to recruit me in order to try to set me up into doing illegal things so they could take my kids eventually. Because they knew as an expendable that I was going to be on to them. They knew I was onto the church. They knew I was going to figure out their stuff sooner or later. So they were ready to come in at any minute and take my kids. They'd already done it to my sister. My sister lost complete custody of her children several years before they tried to do it to me. But she didn't turn to Jesus. She turned to witchcraft. And so I saw what happens when you go down the wrong path. She's totally DID. She's a mess in her life and she's being completely handled. So there's about one way to get out from under if you're in one of those bloodlines, and it's through God and Yeshua. Like, you got to break your curses and claim the blood. So my handbook isn't just about sovereignty, but it's about claiming a true kingdom, a true kingship under Yeshua. And that's where he comes in and intercedes for you. Then he goes and fights your battles for you. And so I see it happening every day. Like, I'll find out about stuff after it happens. I had somebody who came in faking to be a survivor, asking me questions, went and made a whole video about me. Didn't say my name, but they literally just made up a bunch of mad lies against me because they knew I was outing some of their own who are fake survivors, who are breaching the whole survivor community and gathering information to take back to their handlers and to, the hierarchy to report on the defectors. And they're all over planted within the survivor community. So I talk out about that. So then they go try to defame me and make these videos about me. Wow. And before I even knew it had happened, God took care of it. He sent in somebody to fight my battle for me. Somebody else went and told her, you don't even know this girl. She just barely came out of, 2 years of isolation. And she just barely started telling her story. And she's like, well, you're, reporting infiltrators. And she's like, yeah. And I researched their entire life for years before I ever speak out. You don't know her. You talked to her one time. And, so that's what being in that covenant with God does, is he goes and fights your battles. He got me out of the court system as far as family court to where we're supposed to be in mediation, and he's promised me I'm getting my kids back, and I know it's coming. He just told me he wants me to set the table and speak out and share this handbook, and he's going to do a mighty work for me to get everything back and have a restoration from what they took from me. So that promise is sure, and it's written all over in the Bible.
Hopefully my listeners will find that handbook and share that too. Maybe this will help on the spirit level to get Charissa's kids back. We need to reunite people with their loving family. And like you said, the CPS is all Satanism. It's all child trafficking. They take kids from a good home. If you have a good home, they try to take you, and then they put you in a bad place. That way it traumatizes them. Then you grow up to be part of the beast system because you're acting out your trauma. You're just,
Well, and they're taking children who have spoken evidence and have witnessed abuse in their own families, and they're completely handling their case. They're falsifying reports. CPS is all corrupt, changing the kids' testimonies, and then handing the kids to the abusive parent against the safe parent. And, the way that I saw that this ended up happening in my life is it goes all the way back to, the open door to the beast to be able to handle your life is through sin. And I didn't know how to receive revelation about who I married, because all I was told when I was growing up was marry, return missionary, was what my dad told me. So I didn't know how to pray to, the true God, because I was in a Luciferian religion. Well, the Luciferian Holy Spirit is the Kundalini spirit, is the false Holy Spirit. And if you don't know how to pray to the real God and you're under covenant curses, you're going to get messed up. And so that's what I was having when I was going through, these medicine rituals and stuff. Was I was in connection with Kundalini. And so of course God was always there, and I had an anointing, and he allowed me to go into these places protected, but I did get twisted revelations, from the false Holy Spirit. And after being in New Age and shamanism, what I was saying about with David Hamblin, I would sit right next to him in medicine ceremonies. This dude would take 20 dots of combo Do you know what combo is? Is that something I need to explain?
That's from the frog, and they put it in the
Yeah.
skin, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they burn your skin with like a little incense, and then they collect it from the frog in the jungle, and it initiates like a purge. And they usually do it before other medicine ceremonies in order to get rid of the purge. And they tell you you're purging your darkness, but if you read about frogs in the Bible and the spirits that come along with the frog, it's a reptilian medicine, and all of these medicines were given as revelation through pagan rituals.
Right. Jabulan of the Freemasons, the three-headed deity, one of those heads is a frog. And that whole Pepe meme shit, that's the same frog,
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so David would take like 20 dots. I mean, it only took 4 and I'd be puking in like 30 seconds. He'd take 20 dots and he wouldn't even puke. And I saw him, he's huge too. He timbered completely backwards and smacked back, and they go, "Oh, that's great. You just had a full and total rebirth, because you didn't throw up. You
And
did
a
gold star."
concussion. Yeah. Wow.
But I mean, he admitted to me that he had lost his license to practice, and because he was accused of things, and he told me essentially
what things? Sorry.
It was so long ago, and I went through so much PTSD after everything that was done to me, that time and some of the stories, the details I've lost. But I remember for sure that he told me that he was healing clients through sex. But you know what? I didn't think that was that weird at the time, because I had been recruited into a polyamorous cult, and most of these people in these indigenous communities who are involved in these medicine circles, most of them are polyamorous, and they're all about open relationships. And so like sexual healing, kundalini energy within these circles is touted. And so it's not that weird for a medicine man to have thought that sexual healing. He didn't go into the details, so I didn't understand he was like literally molesting and mind controlling and brainwashing these people, and I had no idea that he was a lifelong Satanist. But going in and reading his daughter's testimony blew my mind, because he is a horrific monster. And I would sit and talk with this dude. I didn't know who I was surrounded by. And he's only one of the many that I realized later they were literally trying to have me taken out. Like, there's stuff going on in the spirit and witchcraft that they're using in these medicine circles. And these people that are holding these medicines are witches. And they're working with the enemy against, if you show up as a Christian in those circles, they're going to mess with you. And they were trying to get me out of my body in these ceremonies, because I would go through these intense shaking. And I would see like the freak show of what was going on underneath. Like, it was almost like I was seeing like orgies and stuff. I was seeing what was going on behind these ceremonies, but I didn't know that's what I was seeing. And I would see people's faces that were involved in these cult circles. And I would shake and trauma for, most of my healing ceremonies for me, I was always almost like an intercessory, what would be the word? It's like I would go into intercessory prayer for SRA children who had been victims, or even children who'd been killed in rituals. And I would connect with their spirits, and I would feel them, and I would like shake and tremor with trauma. But really, I didn't realize also these witches were trying to pull me out of my body. Because what they can do is if you astral project and you're on your silver cord, they can cut your cord. So like back in Joseph Smith's day, he had an assassin whose name was, it's slipping my mind right now. I'll remember it in just a second. He has his own liquor line in Utah all over. But Joseph Smith had his own assassin who, a lot of the people who are set up in a certain position, they're not going to go out and kill somebody because it's too dangerous. So they'll have somebody else who does it. They have a pretty dirty criminal that's close to them to do all their dirty work. And so they realize that when somebody defects, it's too dangerous to just kill them. You can't just always kill them. So they try to have you taken out in different ways. Like, okay, if we can get them on drugs and get them to overdose, or if we can get them, in a ritual, or if, in these medicine ceremonies, if we can get them to go in and sit in an indigenous ceremony and get them out of their body, and we can cut their cord. And they've literally been able to murder people through these means. And so as I came away from all of that and going in and seeking healing in that path, to train to be a shaman, I realized that these people were sent in to recruit me into that. And I was still being handled by Illuminati witches all over the place in these circles. So going back to like what happened with me when I wrote sovereignty papers, and the lamb's wool was peeled off my eyes overnight, and my brain started pinging everything. I realized the house I was living in, I was being handled. I was being watched every day. That my family was in on it. It was the first day I really went, oh my gosh, like my family is part of this. And I didn't realize it before. My sister had been telling me. My sister told me, oh, our dad and brothers are all Freemasons. But I just thought that was something she liked to call Mormons, freaking Freemasons.
Because they have the compass and square on the underwear, right? I mean.
Well, yeah. I mean, Mormonism is Freemasonry. They just
exactly.
they don't even. Most people who are, normal members of the church who aren't part of these bloodline cults, they don't realize what they're part of. They don't know that they're being initiated into the rites of Freemasonry and wearing a compass and a square, and under, therefore, the curses and covenants of a Freemason.
The compass and square goes into sex magic, just like the Star of David is like the two triangles combined, like. Mm-hmm. And that's like Lilith and Samael being able to use your body to fornicate again, Yeah.
And it's all over the temples too. The symbolism, like me and my friend were up in like Logan and Brigham City. I went out there a few months ago, and like all of the windows are phallic. They're all shaped like penis. And then right above these phallic windows is a lotus flower, and the lotus flower is a vagina. And so it's like the point is penis, and then right below that, then there's a circle, and it's like a testicle. It's like it's a sex cult, and it's written all over. Even their fences are all
just like the Vatican, just like Washington D.C., like all that.
And that's where the Satanists, where they say their rule is that they have to tell you. So they tell you in their symbolism. So it's like, well, we put penises all over the temple. You didn't see them. I mean, we do have pentagrams on many of our buildings. Like, you didn't notice, Yeah. And no, people don't. And when you point it out to them, they're like, well, that doesn't mean that. And it's, well, they don't want
to believe that it means that. They choose not to believe. Yeah.
So when I took off, like I packed a few little bags, and I didn't even tell my kids what we were doing. Because my sister, what really freaked me out is her handler, that he'd broken her toe, slammed her foot in the door, which I realized it was totally set up, when they did it all on purpose so she could come and be like, I need a place to live. I don't have anybody to take care of me, So she had moved out of living with him, moved into my RV, was watching me, doing witchcraft on me. I found evidence in books of hers. She was doing witchcraft against me and my kids, and texting my family about it because I'd seen text in her phone. But they're all spies. I've had a really hard time doing all of that. I could have found so much more if I hadn't been like, well, they were doing magic over me, so I wouldn't do it. There was also an influence of like not discovering who they really were, a spell over me. So I found enough information. I was like, I got to get out of here like now. And so I just packed a few bags, and I put them in garbage bags and put them in the back of my truck, and started pulling out from the house. And my sister came out with her handler, and they were supposed to have been done because he broke her toe. And they would always send her dogs were coming out every time I'd go out to take the trash out, get the mail. Anytime I'd go outside, she would let her dogs out. And what I realized later is like these witches, it's called scrying, and they can actually astral project into the animal, and they can follow you. So see you. Yeah. So she was watching me through her dogs. And so I was just like, I always hated her dogs anyway. They bugged me. There was something really freaky about them. One of them was named Loki, and I was like, that dog's possessed. Keep it away from me. Literally. And they were. So I got out of there and took my kids and kind of told them what was going on. And we hit the road, and I ended up at a hotel. I was trying to I actually went in that day, and I took out $90,000 in cash out of the bank that I had made off of my house. And because I sold my house and moved into an RV first, and they didn't like that. So I had a divorce clause in my decree that said that I couldn't move outside of Davis County. Well, Davis County, why couldn't I move out of Davis County? Like, my ex was adamant about that, because that's where all of his cult connections were. And they need to be able to have neighbors that will watch you and to keep you under control. So I had boundaries that I was supposed to stay within. And when COVID hit, I sold my house and I was just like, I'm getting out of here. I don't care. I'm taking my kids out of school. They have these poles they're like putting up and messing with the kids. And I was like, I'm not doing this COVID crap with my kids in school. So I just pulled them out. And my ex still lived in California. And so I just did what I wanted, even though I said I couldn't move and it said I couldn't homeschool. And I was like, I don't care. I'm doing this. And so he started a court case against me before it even advanced to this level. He was trying to get me back into Davis County because I was going down to live in southern Utah to try to do some training for shamanism. And I was living on this property and had like an internship there. And it just wasn't panning out. And on one hand, that was the satanic system that was not allowing it to pan out. But I always say, how is this not Satan? How is this God? Because God's way higher than Satan. And the hand of God is always in everything. So even though like they were trying to stop me, God was also allowing them to stop me because that was not the path I was supposed to go down. So I ended up moving back to Davis County into this house that my brother owned. And look, like that was totally, he kicked some tenants out and he said they were moving. They weren't going to move. He finagled that whole thing to get me in there, gave me a really good deal on rent. They were watching me. It was really obvious later looking back that property was like, for like mind control. Like there was weird stuff going on this old farm. And my sister, after I left, she started having rashes all over her body. And as soon as I moved in, they started putting pipes in. They were digging in the ground. And I was asking my brothers and my dad, like, what are all these pipes for? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, you guys are at city council meetings every week and you're developers. What do you mean you don't know? Well, probably the city's just doing something. That's not the city road. This is the private road that comes into my property. And so they were doing something with the water. There was something, and I think they were just poisoning the water in the house. They run stuff through to it. So, and it was right by Hill Air Force Base. I could see Hill Air Force Base from my front window. And it was also right by the Riverdale Police Department, who were the cops who totally screwed me over in my arrest. So anyway, I took off. I went down to southern Utah. I'd taken out $90,000 in cash that day. I was trying to find a hotel. I wasn't going to use my credit card because I knew they'd track me. Because I knew enough about how this all ran that as soon as I figured out my family was in it, I knew exactly what they were going to do. They were going to wipe out my bank account and make my money disappear, and they were going to start tracking me through my card. And so, which is exactly what they did, because the first thing that the cops did when my brother went and claimed that I was a missing person was they went directly to my bank and got permission to, which they can do whatever they want, you know?
Right. If you don't hold it, then you don't own it. Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So the bank didn't even want to give me my money. Like, it was almost like the bank had been flagged beforehand, which I do believe that there's some kind of flagging system, especially in Utah. When there's a defector, there's a mark on all your stuff, you know, that's going to show up. You're flagged. Because I had to go to 3 different banks. I got $25,000 from one bank, $30,000 from another bank, and $50,000 from another bank. And, so I left, got a hotel. I could only find one hotel in southern Utah that would take cash. And it was FLDS, which is the, you know, not the mainstream Mormon church, but the ones who wear like the old clothing, like the Warren Jeffs cult. It was run by an FLDS family, and it was a really rickety hotel. It seemed like a mainstream one, but it was not built well, and the walls were really thin. And the thing that was crazy, it was almost like when that veil was pulled off, God was like, I'm going to take you into the belly of the beast and show you the satanic system at every turn and how wicked this world really is, so you can have an understanding of what I'm setting you free from. And I couldn't get away from it for the entire 7 days. I mean, it was wretched what happened. And so I went to this hotel and I see a little girl coming in and she has a dance bag, and like, there's not very many people staying in this hotel. There was no cars in the parking lot. And through the night, I heard they were talking about ordering a pizza. Then I heard the little girl choking on something. And I could hear the guy saying to her, take it like a good girl. If you learn how to take it like a good, I mean, I had to sit and listen to that. And I was just bawling. I was sick and bawling. And I was just like praying. I was like, God, get me out of here. Like, I cannot be in this space anymore. Like, what is going on? Because I just started realizing my whole family's in on this. Like, I was being followed by witches and Freemasons, and I was just disgusted. And I was so pissed. And so we had to climb out of the window of that hotel the next day. Well, before I left, I looked across the hallway, and I saw at 4 a.m. I heard something going on, and I went and looked out the window because I couldn't sleep or out the peephole. And I saw my brother and all of his kids going into the room across the hall from me. But it was during COVID. And so they had masks on, and they all had all their ski gear on because it was in the middle of winter. And I know all of their walks. I know their heights. I knew it was them. I watched them walk into the room across the hallway from me, and I could feel ritual magic for the rest of the night happening. And so they came there to follow me and do some kind of ritual against me. I could also hear it upstairs. I heard feet running back and forth across the room upstairs, which was not natural. They were doing some crazy ceremony against me there. And I was just like, get me and my freaking kids out of here. And I actually took my whole suitcase and dumped it into the bathtub, and a bunch of my cash and a book that I had a book with me that was given to me by a woman who was like a double agent, controlled disclosure kind of person, who was a therapist who I became friends with. And she'd given me that book by Fritz Springmeier called like how to create a perfectly controlled mind slave, or whatever it's called.
The Illuminati formula. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I never read it. I wasn't that interested in it, but my brother actually took it from me. My brother took it to me, and my 16-year-old niece, he said she stayed up one night and read the whole thing. Why? Because they were learning. She actually passed it to me unknowingly to pass to them. They got it from me through her, and 3 people in my family read it, and I never read it. And I realized why I had it, because on one hand, it can be used to reveal for those who can read it, but on the other hand, it can be used to teach programmers what drugs they can use, it's a whole manual to teach somebody how to be a programmer. And so that was passed to my family through me. They made sure it came through me too. So that's a whole other satanic thing. It's like, well, you passed it to them. So I had that book. I tore that book up and I soaked it. And I was just like, get me out of this freaking hellhole, and washed all of my earthly belongings. Cause I was just like, I don't want any of this shit. I just want God. I was so disgusted that, and that's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize. When you're a truther and you go out and you start revealing the enemy's tactics, you don't know how close to home it is. And it's close to home for everyone, because you don't know who your neighbors are. You don't know that the Satanists can see into, if you're a fence sitter, and you're lukewarm in your devotion to God, they can see that, and they can have power over you, and it leaves gates and doors open. And that's how they mind control a lot of people, is just through the local covens. And so, we climbed out the window, I got out of there, and me and my kids just slept in the truck the rest of the week. And I drove over Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, and just came across a bunch of farms and different stuff. And everywhere I went, I was just bumping into like witches and covens and Freemasons, and I was being tracked. And they actually have a technology where they were tripping the engine of my truck. Like, I'd push on the gas and it would go like almost like it was going to die or something, but it would be right in the middle of the freeway. And they would have like 4 cars come up and surround me, 1 in front of me, 2 beside me, 1 behind me, and my engine would start tripping. And they would have witchcraft stickers on their cars too, a lot of these people. So I was being majorly gang stalked by, their whole cult. They just send out a defector on the loose. This is where they're at. And then they send out the birds. They can scry into flocks of birds. I was being followed by huge flocks of ravens and crows everywhere I went. At one point, there was a massive flock of, what are they called?
Turkey vultures.
Yes. And they don't use. I'm a bird watcher, and they don't fly in flocks like that. And there was like over.
Well,
22
if there's
of
a
them.
dead thing, then they'll circle. There'll be a lot of them.
Yeah.
But if you're on the highway, I don't know why they would follow. Like, I mean, unless your car is the dead thing that they're trying to get.
Yeah. And usually not at the level of like 22. They'll flock a little bit, but not right. In that high of a number.
That's a lot.
Because there's usually not enough food to feed that many birds. There's usually a few of them fighting over it. But yeah, so and I realized that was going on because there was an Illuminati witch, and he had told me his whole story. He told me how his dad sexually abused him when he was younger. What I realized later is he was being initiated in the rites of Freemasonry and sodomy through his stepdad. And he was now like a high occultic witch for the Illuminati and was showing up at these ceremonies and being sent in. And his name was Raven. Huh. And he touted his gifts with animals and how they would flock around him. And what I felt, I could feel him when I was on the road watching me. Like he was the one who was astral projecting into these birds and following me. And my brother, there was a whole situation that I won't go into where I knew my brother was connected to him. He set it up they create false synchronicities in order to make you think God set this up, put this person in your path. And they set that up with Raven beforehand. And then I could just feel him everywhere I was going, And I called him out on it later. Once I got home, I messaged him. I'm like, I know exactly what you're doing. You need to back off. You're going to be punished for what you're doing. Stay out of my life and stay out of my spirit. And then I just blocked him and never talked to him again. But so that all took place, all the stalking. And then I came back and there's a whole story that happened that's in a lot of my other interviews. If, anybody wants to hear about it, what happened out on Antelope Island, they can kind of go watch that because it's kind of a long story. But, I ended up having a crazy thing. I came upon there, a ritual that was about to go down, and I ended up following this guy off the island. And, so we ended up turning our phones back on. And that was the day I returned to the area because I had to go take my kids back because it was their dad's parent time that weekend. And he only had them every other weekend and he would fly in from California. So I was going to go to call him that night and went back into the area, drove out to Antelope, headed back after I found this guy. I followed him to try to figure out who it was. Holy Spirit told me I needed to see who he was and get a good look at his face. And he ended up calling the police. We tried to call the police too. We had a whole thing in a parking lot where I figured out who he was, and he was the father of some close friends of mine. And so then I really understood why that family had some of the issues that they did and who he was and how high he was. So he's a dentist. And they made a kid disappear in the parking lot. They right in front of us, the kid that was in his car. And I don't know if they did it through magic and vision over our mind, or if I don't believe that they have the power to actually transfer human flesh into a different car. But, they made this kid that they were using.
They could maybe have done a glamour over you so that you couldn't see it.
Well, it was a switch because the person who was in the car was a kid. We saw them out there with this little boy, and they pulled up and touched noses with another car. And they sat there for a minute before the cops showed up in the parking lot. And I was just sitting there waiting for the cops to come. I knew my daughter tried to call, but her phone was waterlogged. And so the cops pulled in pretty quick after, and I was just sitting there watching him. But he literally touched noses of the car with this other car that he pulled into. And after the fact, what I realized had happened is there's not service out on Antelope Island. So once he got in there, he called one of his local sorcerers. He shows up in the parking lot to meet him. And he does black magic right there in front of me to hide this kid. And the cops open the back door and show me, and they're like, it's not even a kid, that's a woman. And it was blurry, and so I don't know if they cast a vision over my eyes so it looked like a woman, but those cops were totally in on it. They were exactly aware. They helped set it up. One of them walked like a cyborg back to his car like this, and they literally used psychic warfare on my daughter because I gave them the wrong phone number, and my daughter told them my right phone number. My daughter knows better, and she would have never done that. And I saw the guy just staring at my kids. That show, Men Who something goats.
Stare at.
He was literally doing that shit to my daughter. I saw it, and I know my daughter, she wouldn't have said and corrected me, but she spilled it out because they'll use psychic warfare on you. These police are trained in this crap. They're all sorcerers. And so then we took off and went to I just went up the road a little ways and pulled over in a neighborhood. And I just put my head down, and I was just like, oh my gosh, everything I've seen this week, I cannot believe it. I had been bawling all day, and I was just they've all turned. I was just telling God, they've all turned. Everybody I knew, I was seeing my whole family. They're all just perverse as it gets into the most disgusting things. And I just can't even fathom what is going on in this world. And it was on a whole different level because I had known for years what was going on in the Illuminati. But when it's not in your own neighborhood and you don't realize that it touches your own very life, it's not as traumatizing. But that's one of the things about a lot of people, like I was saying with these truthers, is they don't realize what lays at the end of not breaking your own curses and renouncing all of these things and claiming your birthrights is that, if you're still talking about this stuff and you have videos out there and all this and you haven't set yourself free, when the strong arm comes down and martial law goes into place and they start really coming down on all the defectors, and if you're not in line in the system, and you're trying to get out from under whatever next little thing they come up with to lock everybody up, like, you might be in trouble if you have their secrets, if you haven't done the work in the spirit. And I've seen it a million times, because there was another guy that I met, it was some of those same ceremonies that I met David Hamblin at, and he was into high mysticism and like magic, and he was there doing combo because he had a traumatic like awakening that he was trying to like purge, and it's interesting because I look back and I'm like, he was going about it all the wrong ways, and he didn't get set free, and he's disappeared, and I don't know what's happened to him since then. But he was a very interesting person. He had this thing that he would do when he would talk, and he was very like always like talking with his whole body, not just his arms, but his legs. Every word that came out of his mouth was very animated. And he actually explained to me how it was a language, it was spiritual language of bodily sign language that was a form of mysticism that he had been given a spiritual gift of. And so he was talking through this, and as he would speak, he was doing all of these symbols, and it wasn't just movement, it was very like specific things he would do. It definitely looked like sign language.
Mudras with his hands too,
and his legs and his arms, everything was doing something. The way his body would move, and it was fascinating. I've never heard of any such thing. But so he told me what.
Oh, I was just gonna say I have I've heard of that.
Oh, you've heard of it?
Crowley would do that stuff. Like Crowley started it with yoga, and like your movements can channel different non-corporeal entities and whatnot.
Okay. Yeah, that's what he was doing. And so he told me that these guys who he considered brothers, which, I believe he was using code language for Freemasonry or some type of mystic brotherhood. And he grew up Mormon. So he was he went on a Mormon mission, but then he'd gone into all this mysticism all these years later. And I believe he was probably in a bloodline family and was sent down that path, trained up in the rites of Freemasonry from his youth. But I mean, he was like, all these guys that I've studied mysticism with for years, who I considered my brothers, I went through this experience with them. And he said, I started doing this language and developed this ability, and they started threatening me. They started coming to me and saying, you can't do that. Like, that's ancient sacred stuff, and you can't just be out in public doing that all the time. And he was like, all right, well, thanks, dude. I'll do what I want. And they kept kind of warning him to the point where he blew him off. And he said he was sitting in his room one day, in his bedroom, just on his bed, like writing in his journal or something. And these friends showed up in his room and just all of a sudden walked in his bedroom. And he said they cast this crazy like energy over him, just immense fear. And he said they stood in front of me and they said, you will stop or else something, and then he said, and then they revealed their true faces to me. And I was like, their true faces. Okay. What do their true faces look like? And he said, I will never tell. I will never repeat that, because it was the most traumatizing thing I've ever seen in my life. And I don't want anybody to even try to imagine that trauma. And he said, but I recognize that all of this was my own doing and my own fault, because I sought, it was something that I had been seeking after to learn about through, this discovery of truth, through this mysticism. And it was what was at the end of the road. And so there are other hybrids here that are among us, that I think is in way higher proportion than any of us realize, playing a role and a part. And, they're not human. They're not fully human. And, when you start defecting or doing your own thing, or, telling the truth, whatever it may be. I mean, in his path, he was defecting because he was doing what he wanted. He wasn't obeying the hierarchy of control within whatever, system of mysticism he was in. And so I saw him traumatized every day, puking his guts out, trying to take as much combo as he could to get rid of that ceremony or to get rid of that trauma. And, all these guys that were around in these groups, I later just realized that they were in high positions in the Illuminati, especially this guy, David Hamblin, who is a Satanist. And I believe the guy that served nearly all of the combo I ever did, that he was a Satanist. He was trying to handle me as well. I mean, he messed with me in a lot of different ways, and he was clearly like a high sorcerer, I realized later. And so, that opened a lot of doors and gateways of danger and trouble for me spiritually that I was completely naive to. And so anyway, after I took off and came back and met with left the police, went and I was trying to call my husband, all of a sudden somebody knocks on my window and I look up and there's an officer standing there, but he didn't have on a uniform. And I roll down the window and there was a couple officers standing behind him. And he was basically like went off for 5 minutes about how, where have you been for the past week? We've been looking for you. I know that you think that you're a sovereign citizen or that you're not under our jurisdiction, under land or whatever. But, we brought a jurisdictional officer with us and you've been da-da-da-da-da. And he just went off on this rant for like 5 minutes while I'm just sitting there like traumatized after I just saw this whole black magic thing play out in front of me. And so then I'm like, now I really know I'm in trouble because now I know to the level of the cops are covering it up, even using magic. And here I'm talking to this guy who's not even in a uniform, no body cam running, which is legally, he's supposed to have a body cam running upon approach of my vehicle, especially the fact that they were about to put out a missing person, like a Amber Alert for me. He said they were moments away from issuing an Amber Alert that I had been a missing person for the past week. And so eventually between Syracuse and Riverdale police departments, there was about 12 different officers that showed up on scene, 6 different squad vehicles, and 2 different cities of police departments just to show up to do a welfare check for a missing person, But I had gone to find my brother that day to have him help me find my other brother's office, who I thought I could trust, because he owns a gun manufacturing company. And he just moved his factory, and I went to try to find his new office and I couldn't find it. So I went to my other brother's house and I was like, I need you to take me to Jared's office. And so he drove me, he rode with me in my truck, and he had on Google glasses, and my kids were in the back of the seat, like, he is recording this whole thing. And so he ended up freaking out on me. I could tell that he was not on my team that day in the car. Like, I wasn't sure, who was who. I had a good idea, but really what God sent me back in to get proof by the behaviors of everybody who showed themselves to me. And so my brother, he's like asking my kids, like, where has your mom been acting like this all week? And I'm like, shut up. I go, don't talk to my kids. Cause I knew immediately that he was trying to frame me to act like I was crazy. Well, all I did was I was just like, I'm trying to find Jared's office. I need you to take me down there. And he barely tried to talk to me a little bit at the beginning. I said, let's just don't talk. Just tell me how to get there. That's it. That's all I want. And so at one point he got all pissed and he's like, I feel like I'm a prisoner in your car. I said, you're not a prisoner. I said, you're welcome to leave at any time. And the car was still moving. He jumped out of the truck. And I was like, I was like, Josh. And he looks back at me and he's like, what? And I said, I love you. And he goes, oh, like the words, I love you. Like, I was like, okay, Satan, like, hello. Right. Okay, never mind. Bye. I mean,
you jumped out of a moving car. Were you fast? Were you going fast?
I was going slow. We were in a parking lot.
That's good.
Yeah, that was pretty slow. But then he went and told the police that I kicked him out. The police.
And he's got proof on the glasses, right? Yeah.
Well, and yeah, that's what it's like. Well, why don't we pull out those glasses and find out what really happened?
Right.
So, which he never admitted that that's what they were. But my kids, I didn't even know there was such a thing. My kids, after he got out, they were like, he was recording us the whole time on those glasses. And I was like, I had to go and look on the internet to realize that was even a real thing that they use. And so, so back to the police scene, you know, I'm just realizing all this that's going down. And I'm out of my truck, and they asked to talk to my kids, and I told him no. And he went over anyways and opened the door and asked my kids how they were doing and started talking to them. And it just was disgusting. Everything in the whole police report, it's all lies. They just
so that's against the law too. I mean, you can use that in your in your fight in the court. You know, that's another piece of, like, they can't use any of that evidence that they got from the kids or whatever it is that they, because it's not admissible, because it was against the law for them to even ask the kids, because
well, they everything they did was illegal. I have like 20 different codes cited in my argument that for the motion I'm preparing right now for a motion to dismiss. Good. But the main thing is that I'm fighting is motion to dismiss for destruction of body cam footage, because they claim that they destroyed the main officer's body cam footage because there wasn't going to be criminal charges brought. Well, there's not going to be criminal charges brought, and you destroyed the evidence, but they're supposed to keep it for a year, but it hadn't even been a year. Like, it's just all BS. And the reason they don't have body cam footage is because I think they used the highest sourcer on the squad to come who wasn't in a uniform, and there's no recording of the first like 20 minutes of my stop. And it's all just made up BS, you know? So that's where my main fight is they say they destroyed evidence, which I personally believe they didn't even collect evidence, because you can see in all of the body cam footage that their two main officers who dealt with me are not even in uniforms. And I asked that officer while I was sitting there, once I realized what was going on, and all of the cops had kind of gathered in a triangle in front of me, like as a strong show of force. Because, well, that was one of the things that my ex-attorney was arguing in my first motion to suppress evidence, was that they used show of force, like where there was just a typical traffic stop. They held me for over 45 minutes, and they used an incredible amount of officers to show force to intimidate. And so when I went back and watched the footage, so there were two pipes in my truck in the glove box placed there by my daughter. And we knew that they were in there, or not. We didn't know they were in there. She knew they were in there.
What, cannabis pipes, whatever?
Yeah. Glass pipes, which didn't test. I mean, there's no proof that they even had cannabis on them. Good. Because they didn't end up testing out. But I don't know that matters. I haven't been able to find anything in the law.
Well, that's just another way that they can get their hooks in you. You know, like, oh, you're a criminal because you do this thing that doesn't hurt anybody. But, you know, that's a whole system of domination right there, the drug laws. So I understand it's like.
Well, and when I lived in California, my ex-husband, who was the one who really pushed all of the, charges to come forward, like, we used to smoke in California legally together, but then he makes it like, well, I don't trust her around my children because they found pipes in her truck. So
that's what happened? How he uses it against you, right?
Yeah.
He's just like them, right? Yeah.
But it wasn't an aftermath. This was all, people need to understand this was premeditated, a planned thing that they planned out for the week while I was gone, because he knew that my daughter was getting cannabis from her cousin, because my brother would provide it for his niece. And he knew that there might be the stuff in the truck, and they knew that there was $90,000 cash in my truck as well. And they said it in multiple pieces on the body cam footage. So
they'll take it because there's a pipe. They're like, you're a drug dealer. We're taking this money, and you can't do anything about it. They don't even have to charge you. That's a law that Joe Biden wrote, like back in the 90s.
Well, they didn't even do that. They didn't even do that. They gave me back $38,000, and $50,000 of it just went missing and unmentioned. Even though they mentioned in the report where the money was found, they say they found cash under the driver's side floor mat, which is where the envelope that had the most amount of cash, 50, that was missing. And it shows them stealing it right on the video camera. You can see it on the body cam footage. And so I just can't wait to submit that evidence once I get everything put together, because they were idiots. They thought, well, I'll turn off my body cam, but they forgot there was 6 cars there. And I have the dash cam footage too, of them taking the envelope out, going and sitting in the back of one of the squad vehicles, handling that cash for like 4 minutes. He's probably just sitting there counting it, going back to the truck, putting it in. And before they started the official camera of their official search on my truck, but which still wasn't even official, because I found major clauses and issues and what's it called? It's the kind of something law where there's a previous case law.
Right.
I found a case where they dismissed the charges of this guy who they found all the evidence that he was actually a robber of this whole bank in his truck. But because they didn't impound his vehicle correctly, they had to dismiss the whole charges. Well, that's exactly what happened in my case.
Oh.
First of all, what they did is they say that they found pipes in the glove box, but then they say that one of the police say he found pipes in the glove box. Another cop says we found pipes on the floorboard and on the back floorboard, just sitting out in reach of the children to be able to grab. So it goes from paraphernalia to child endangerment. And they needed it to be child endangerment in order for my ex-husband to take custody of my children. So they tampered with evidence, planted evidence, moved it around, and set up a whole framing. And
it's so logically impossible that a glass pipe could hurt your child. Like, even if it's broken, like broken glass shards.
Who is stupid enough? Well, and it is stupid. It is the law that if you have paraphernalia within the reach of children, but who's stupid enough to just leave a pipe sitting around the car, just floating around? Like, even if it was me, even if it was my pipe, even if it was like, I'm not that stupid. Like, you guys are idiots, Right. So they
I'm glad you have camera footage of them doing this stuff. Like,
yeah, you can see 6 cops standing at the door for 20 minutes, moving my suitcase, doing all this stuff. Then they turn the thing on to search my vehicle. And actually what the law says that they have to do is that when they're impounding a vehicle, they weren't even supposed to take me off scene before they did what they did. They were supposed to let me stay there and say, do you have any valuables in your truck? Okay, well, they already knew that I had $90,000 because they had gone to my bank, and they say it multiple times in the footage, like, oh, she has $90,000 cash in that truck. And so they were supposed to ask me if what I wanted them to do with it, if I wanted to hold it for safe. They could have put it at the locker at the hospital that they took me to. They could have offered to give it to my or have me offer, but I'm supposed to be given authority over to tell them what to do with it.
Right.
Well, not only did they not do that, they say that they, in their reports, that they asked my family to hold the stuff. Both of my brothers deny that they were asked to hold my cash or to take my truck home. And I have email evidence of my brother saying, no, they never asked me. And then they got in my truck and drove it themselves. And so the whole impounding was all mishandled according to the law and the what they're supposed to do. But they just think, oh, she's this stupid little defector, like female, who's not going to figure all this out. And so we're just going to say what we're going to say and make this case so messy that she isn't going to know her head from her ass, and she's not going to be able to get out from under these charges. And so after he counted my money at the very end, the last dash cam footage, when there's only 2 cops left on the scene, they say my vehicle was towed. One of the officers is standing at my truck, and they had at that point taken the cash out of an envelope, and he turns with a stack of cash in his hand this big and holds it up to the other officer like, look at this. And I mean, they're sitting there like laughing about it, and it's all caught on the dash cam footage, and he's holding a huge stack of cash in his hand.
Right.
And then he gets in my truck and drives it away. It says in the report that they towed my truck. So the whole thing was a big, huge setup that was disgustingly, I mean, it's so I can't even, in the report, I can't even go into all of it. I can only focus on even the bare minimum. I only have 25 pages, and I'm trying to edit it down from 35 right now to, be able to even turn it in. I mean, I have this stick of police reports and evidence with highlights and stuff all over it, just saying this is all lies. But I mean, yeah, in Mormonism in Utah, the Freemasons run everything, and the cops were sorcerers. And this is what I was going to tell you. I was sitting there with this one officer who didn't have a uniform on up on the hill later after I got out of my truck, and I can see what's going on when they gathered in this triangle, and I can feel their show of force, and just I can feel magic and sorcery and stuff like that. Like it was palpable in the air. And he's sitting right in front of me, and I said, "Sir, do you believe in God?" And he's like, yeah, I believe in God. And I said, "Really?" I said, "What's your God's name?" And he goes, "Well, that's like sacred. I don't want to reveal that." And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, you idiot, freaking Yahweh wants everybody to know his name. I know exactly who your God is. Like, he told me he was a Satanist right there.
Right.
And
that's great. That's so funny.
Yeah. So and then another thing that they did that was so messed up was my youngest daughter, who was only 9 at the time. Like, she was running around crying. They were trying to take her and put her in my ex-husband's car because he showed up on scene to pick up the kids. And they said they needed to assist in me turning my kids over because I was being resistant. That's not even true. When they pulled up, I said, I'm trying to call my husband right now, my ex-husband right now, to initiate this exchange. And they wouldn't let me do it. They wanted to take me like, all they were supposed to be doing was a welfare check. You're good. The kids are good. Okay. You're setting up the check. Okay. Bye. They should have left right then. Instead, they held me, interrogated me, this and that, line of questioning, show of force for excessive amount of time. And then, I literally said, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I dismantle the satanic brotherhood." I said that right in front of all of them. And they were so pissed that I knew exactly what they were doing. They just all sat there and then they just wrote in the reports that I was crazy. So half of my claims in my document to the court is that, they used spiritual, religious freedom of speech and bias for me to pray in a public place when they were using show of force to claim that I had a mental disorder, because all of their documents are like, she was claiming they're praying to the gods of heaven and calling out to the heavens and, yelling the name of Jesus and totally mocking my public prayer of these abusing sodomites who are standing here completely taking away my children. And I knew what was going on because my ex-husband had told me for years that he was going to take full custody of my kids. And guess what? I didn't see my kids for 6 months after that night. I knew that's exactly what was about to happen. And they knew exactly that I knew who they were, and they helped him. They helped him in every way take custody of those kids, shut me up, and they all hated me because they knew that I could see exactly what was going on. So,
your ex-husband is in the order still, is in the cult.
Oh yeah. I've called him out on it.
So they're bound to help him anyway. They have to. It's
their oath that they make within these brotherhoods is an oath above and beyond their oaths to the legal system, to anything to their family. Their oath to their brotherhood supersedes all other oaths. Right. And so they're bound to help him. And, of course, all these years later, I still had a hard time really believing he was in on it for a while, because it's really hard to believe that you could be married to a monster for that long and have no clue. But it also made a lot of sense. It was very easy to see once, I could see it, that our marriage was arranged. It was set up by my family. He was my handler. He couldn't stand being married to me because we weren't the same. We thought we were both Mormon. I thought we were both Mormon. I didn't know, and I realized dreams I'd had over the years, experiences I had with him. He was totally a Satanist. And he has still, tried to mess me over so much since then, with a bitterness and a vengeance in his heart that makes it even more obvious, who could do this to the mother of their own children at the expense of his own children. And, he pulled up one night and I found out that after I lost my job, and I had never told him, I found out through my daughter that he knew that I had lost my job, and he started confronting my daughter about it. Why did mom quit her job? You know, what happened? And I didn't quit well, as far as I was going to tell him, I was fired. And that was what my kids thought and knew. And so he started telling me I needed to get another job, and you need to get a job. And I was trying to get on government assistance. And I was like, how do you know I lost my job? And he said, well, because it's obvious. You're always home. And I'm like, I don't talk to you. What do you mean I'm always home? We don't talk. We don't communicate. How do you know where I'm at or if I'm at work or not? You know, like nothing made any sense. And I said, I know exactly how you know. And I knew because that's why I quit, because the people who helped me get the job, I found out were in his little brotherhood. So after I found out he had confronted my daughter about it, and I was so livid that I'd lost my job, I walked outside of my apartment and I went right out to his car, and I said, I want you to tell me how you know that I lost who told you that I lost my job? And he goes, I don't have to tell you. It's not your business. It's obvious. And I said, it's not obvious. Nothing's obvious. And he goes, this is why we're not still married, because you're crazy. And I said, no, we're actually we're actually not married because we should have never been married in the first place, because it was an arranged marriage and you never loved me, and you're a freaking sodomite, and you love it in the ass, and you love Satan, and you make me sick. And I just went off on him, you know, awesome. And told him exactly who I knew that he was. And God has told me several times, warn him, tell him. Like, I've sent him scriptures. I've told him, I know what's going on. I know what this is. And when I've sent him Bible verses, and he claims to still want to be a Mormon and go to Mormon church, but if I send him Bible verses, I get back his response is, fuck you, you know? So, he's taken off his mask in every sense of the word to me. And, you know, he has absolutely no shame. He's told me straight to my face. Like, he goes, I don't have any guilt for anything that I've done. I have no guilt. And I'm like, that's apparent, you know? So,
harm. I should have guilt. I mean, you're still suffering without do you see your children? I mean,
I didn't for 6 months, and this was all took place about 2 years ago ish. And, I had to have supervised visits. I didn't see them at all for 6 months. And then I did supervised visits for 6 months, which was just ridiculous. It was almost like not seeing them. It was just worse and horrific for all of us. Right. And then, I went to every other weekends. I was able to get, you know, some visitation without, and a lot of it was, I didn't have a place to live for a long time. I had to rent a room at a lady's house. I was homeless for a month because that whole scenario that night set me up to like, it completely ruined my whole well-being and livelihood, because they put me in the psych ward. I was there for 7 days. And what happened there is a whole other level of corruption in the medical system. I mean, they didn't let me out of my room for 7 days. They wouldn't let me make a phone call. I'm supposed to be able to make a phone call within 3 hours of getting there. They wouldn't let me use the phone for the first 4 days. I had to have my brother go buy me a cell phone. He brought me a cell phone. It was totally tapped. It wasn't even the cell phone that was on the receipt that he said he bought me with. It was a different number. Like when I tried to go take the phone back to exchange it, because they were tapping into my phone. It was so crazy. I mean, I didn't give them any blood. I wouldn't give them any urine, because I knew that they were just trying to get my DNA and trying to collect, you know, see what was in my blood, trying to pin drug charges and stuff on me.
Or they could do their ritual magic with your blood. And
yeah. Exactly. They could have done anything. And I was just like, I said, my religious and spiritual gifts, I do not give my bodily fluids. I will not. And the hospital was obviously, I tell a lot more detail in some of my other interviews about what happened at the hospital and what a joke that all was, but it was obviously run by Freemasons and witches. In Utah, they run everything. Everything that would need to be infiltrated and run by these satanic systems in order to correct a defector, to frame a defector with mental disorder, is set up so that they can, you know, do the Darvo technique and, you know, turn it on you.
Darvo, could you explain that?
Darvo, I got to remember what that deny, accuse. I can't remember what the R is. And then, deny, accuse, reverse, offender, and victim. So they turn your perpetrator into the victim, and they turn the victim into the perpetrator by a reversal of the whole story, which is what they did which is what they do to all the mothers that I'm working with in the system who, married a brother man. And one of the things is that I'm finding is these patterns are all very similar between me and these other women. Because most of us are expendables. And so they have you marry into, a brotherhood to be handled, and you don't realize who you're marrying, and you have children with these monsters, and then they do horrendous things to your children, and they get them either cult active or initiated into the brotherhood, and they just handle you your whole life. And once you grow into this relationship and things develop and you realize and you go to get divorced, then they send in other handlers. They try to arrange your next relationship. They send in one of their brotherhood to come and try to be your next boyfriend. They love having one of their Freemason brothers move in with you. And I've seen it a million times now, with these women. All of their relationships after they get out of that relationship is just another brotherhood, which to me, I just realized a lot of the things that are Christian-based moral laws of the Bible that I left behind when I left Mormonism are protection,
Right.
actually having, not having sex before marriage and having a monogamous relationship and receiving revelation from God about who you have a relationship with, and not trusting anyone. As it says in the Bible, do not trust in a friend or in a counselor. God tells us how corrupt it is. And there's stuff I can't even open to a page anymore without God speaking about the corruption within the justice system and how you don't even trust your neighbor. If you have one good friend in your life, count it a blessing. And so it's so sad because I see so many women who've had their children taken away and are all wrapped up in these situations and in these marriages. And essentially what it goes back to at the very root of it, when you trace it back, is not being careful and not knowing who you're going into a relationship with, and not keeping covenants with God. And I know that's really unpopular frame of mind right now in the world. I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in religion. I think it's the most corrupt, evil thing on the planet. But I do believe in biblical law. And I do believe that they are there to protect us. And I believe that when we go against biblical law, that it opens doors for these men to come into our lives and completely annihilate us.
Right. Because it's like contracts and talismans and these things. This is like the ancient Egyptian magic. And a contract takes your will, you agree to it, you sign your name. So then, because it's your will, this is a free will environment, and God allows you to do what you're going to do if you choose the wrong path. So that's what, the whole thing with contracts. And so even the demons work under contracts. I've studied this, and I've spoken with Jerry Marzinski. I've had many episodes with him, and he's a psychologist who has worked with schizophrenics in prisons, and the voices he recognizes that they are demons basically, and he talks about they act like they're coming in and punching a clock, and they've got this boss that's telling them what to do, and they and if they don't follow orders, they go to the pit, and so they have this structure of law that they have to abide, even in the other realm, so this is how it works all the way down. It's just that was just translated to the 3D realm. We have a law of morality and do no harm, take no shit from anybody, and that's the law, right? And everything else that man decrees, oh well, it's the law for me to take this much of your income every month or whatever. That's Satanism. These people that they say they can speak laws, you can't. You know what I mean? They anyway. You can't bind people to your speech. You can make them agree with it, and then they're bound with their own free will, right? So.
Which is how we end up in soul contracts and soul ties in dark bonds with people through sex, is, and I actually had a crazy like download one day, it was, sometimes I just get like a really huge download that's like a spiritual mapping thing all in 1 second that it's hard to even explain. Or like I was living in an RV park with this old guy that I was buddies with when I was on the road and hiding from everybody. And I said, go inside and get a notebook. I need a notebook. And all of a sudden I just started drawing, and it was essentially like the triangle of God, and then the reversal, the Illuminati triangle, the upside down. And how I saw it was in their hierarchical systems of how the hierarchy of the fallen and the kingdom of darkness is an exact mirror of the kingdom of light, with God at the top, and Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, and then from there down, it's a perfect mirror of their
just
structure.
Like the tree of life above and the tree of the Klepoth, the black tree that goes down below. Like at the top is Kether, is like unity with the oneness and whatever, and then Malkuth is where we live, but then below that is the Lilith realms, and then goes deep into like total separation from the oneness, like being, so I understand that completely.
And that's what's tricky, because the fallen angels used to work for God, so they know the order of the kingdom of light and its structure under Yahweh. And so now when they fall and they become now gods of darkness, and they know how to perfectly mimic the structure of gods, which is why like somebody like Joseph Smith can say, oh, I had this vision, and make it seem really legit. And like it was God, like even like the shaman who I did combo with, one of the things he came and told me the first time I met David Hamblin, at this weekend ceremony at this cabin up in the mountains, he came and told me, I had a vision of, he said, mother and father. And it was like just the Joseph Smith story again. He said, I had a vision of Heavenly Mother and Heavenly Father in an ayahuasca ceremony one day, and I knew that I was going to serve this medicine. And they came down. He goes, I almost didn't take the medicine that night. I almost didn't drink it because I was so scared, because I felt it coming. It's so powerful to like have, an interaction with a heavenly being. And he tells me this whole story about these beings that came and like initiated him into the rites of being a medicine man as a shaman. And it was very similar to like the story that Joseph Smith tells, how he saw God the Father and Jesus Christ in the grove. And, but these experiences, when they come with this fear, and like, I almost didn't drink it, that's a fallen angel. That's a false vision. That's the kingdom of darkness. They know how to mimic. It says in the Bible, like, don't be surprised, even Satan, like, or Lucifer prances about as an angel of light, and I feel like most of the stories that I've listened to, because and read about, I was always into very kind of taboo topics and spiritual books and near-death experiences. I feel like most of that stuff that we hear about, a good portion of it is hearing from the fallen, because we don't even know the concept of purity anymore. We don't even know the concept of holiness anymore, because we're so far away from that at this time on the earth, that even those of us who are the most pure and like just can't stand what they're doing to the children of this earth, still can't even quite grasp what God wants us to really be and what he intended it for us to be. And so that leaves these doors open for us to be influenced by, you seek a spiritual experience and you do it and you take a shortcut, you're going to end up in the wrong kingdom. And I've met that 1,000 times over. And the goal, the journey, the way isn't to seek a spiritual experience. You can have that any minute. You can go take mushrooms and you can go, drink some ayahuasca, go smoke some weed, depending on, your tolerance level. Like, you can have a spiritual experience with a being through a shortcut any day of the week. It doesn't mean it's from the right source, and it doesn't mean that it's who you think it is, because there's plenty of people prancing about in the spirit realm pretending to be somebody that they're not. And so, the way is to seek that covenant first, to seek and know who is just, who redeemed you, who is your intercessor, and who your king and judge are. And then, seek ye first the kingdom of God, then all things shall be added unto you. So you have to seek that first, then you get to have a spiritual experience. I'm still waiting for a lot of things that have been promised to me to come, and I still feel like a baby, and I've been seeking for years. But he wanted to make sure that I had, it written on my heart and my soul and tongue, so I could go out and witness what's the true way to people, to go, it's not there, it's not here, and it's not there. It's in the kingdom. We have to seek that covenant and that relationship, because that's where safety is. That's where that protection comes in. And that's why I'm able even to be here and talk today, because I couldn't for 2 years. He put me into isolation, said, go lock yourself in your bedroom. Don't talk to anyone. I'm going to teach you a bunch of stuff. I'm going to teach you warfare. Then you can go out and talk under a covenant, because you need to do it protected.
Well, I love that you came to talk with us today. This has been so enlightening and extremely interesting. I would love to learn more. I'm getting close to where I have to start getting to work. So
you've been going a while. It's time.
Yeah. It's really been infinitely fascinating to me, and if you would care to come back again, maybe we could dig further into some portion of these topics and really learn more.
Sure.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. So people can find you by emailing attorney at yah, Y-A-H, at gmail.com. Can they find you anywhere else, or do you speak online, or do you have an Instagram or anything?
Yeah, so my Instagram is also attorney at yah. And I have a lot of posts there that kind of go into more detail about the church and how it functions and how it kind of bleeds into other aspects of society. And then also, a lot of scriptural stuff to go along with it, because I fully believe that, in order to talk about this stuff, if you're just, exposing the darkness without solutions, without spiritual remedy, you're going to get yourself into a world of trouble, because Satan's pissed when people talk about his stuff, so you gotta have some tools in your handbag to be able to do it. So, and then my daughter just barely started my own YouTube channel, which is now up.
Good.
It's called KadoshLife, which, Kadosh is setting apart, a life set apart. And so,
wow. There's a Kadosh level of Freemasonry.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that's represented by the double-headed eagle. I think it's like 32 or something.
That is so crazy, because I did not even know that. And my daughter just made my intro video, or like the segment that's going to go before my videos. And one of them that she put in the clip is me in front. We were in Colorado Springs. I took her there, or to Denver, for a concert for her birthday. And we were riding scooters around town, and I landed upon the Freemason Lodge. And I was like, oh, look at this. I always run into this in town. And so we were taking pictures of it. And I went up to it next to the double-headed eagle. And in my intro is me going,
great.
Eagle.
That's great.
And I didn't even know that. So that's crazy, because that's
funny. Is it spelled Kadosh or something?
Yeah, Kadosh.
I think it's Knights of the Kadosh, or Knights Kadosh degree or something. Look that up. Yeah. Okay, so your YouTube is KADOSH, just Kadosh what?
Life.
Kadosh Life. Okay.
And it's kind of hard to find, because it's brand new, and it only has it has my first 2 videos. All my other interviews that I've done with everybody else, they've sent to me. So I'm putting up all those interviews first.
I'll send you this.
And then okay, awesome.
Would you send me the link to that so that I can find it easily? And I'll put that with the people can find that here in the links below of this video. Thank you.
It's also on my Instagram. And so pretty soon through my Instagram, my daughter also just opened, I've been anti a lot of these social media platforms, because they were using Facebook to track me and everything. So I only have Instagram right now.
Instagram is Facebook. So, you know,
Yeah.
they bought Instagram. So, but still, and it probably
It
does
is.
track. Don't use the app. Use it through your browser on your phone. That way, the
Oh.
app isn't on the phone. You can still
Oh,
use it through a browser, and that because the app is like sucking information out. Like if you're through the browser, you can have a browser that like stops cookies and stops the trackers, you know, like, and you can like
oh.
visit Facebook through the browser and visit. You don't have to have those apps on your phone.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
all right, okay, good.
Well, that's why I had to stop worrying about all of that stuff,
I'm
and that's
sorry,
why.
I don't mean to worry
No, no,
you.
no.
I use
No, you're not
Instagram
worrying
too,
me.
like whatever.
You're not
Yeah,
worrying me. I'm just
okay,
saying
good.
that they're in everything, and for
They
me to
are,
even be able
yes.
to have a voice out there, you know, at some point
You
I'd
have
love
to
to
be
get
brave.
on totally independent places, but doing the warfare that I did and getting set free, that was when he told me to go open the Instagram page.
Good.
And
There's a lot of viewers. There's a lot of people looking. So it's a great
yeah,
place. Just like YouTube, same thing. Even though it's run by, you know, Google and
yeah.
all that. But
But I'm gonna get into some other. I'm gonna do well, probably on this platform that you're on, and what's the other one that I said
but the
earlier? Is it
Odyssey,
Rumble?
yeah, Odyssey and Rumble are good. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
good. BitChute only allows like 2 gigabytes or something per video. So you got to shrink some of the videos. I tried to
yeah,
put a 6-hour video just today, and they're like, I had to keep shrinking it. Like, but anyway, yeah,
yeah. I'm just.
Odyssey is fantastic because it like puts it on a blockchain and they can't erase it. It doesn't get erased. They
Oh,
won't
that's
erase.
awesome.
So like it is freedom of, you
Yeah.
know, and people can download from there. So you can encourage people, like if you want them to take and share the information, say you can download right from Odyssey. So that's
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know because, you know, if so far my other interviews that I've done on YouTube, they've all posted and they've
good.
been, you know, viewed and approved. And so I just feel like there's an anointing there's a protection that comes, you know, and God gives you a purpose to speak. And so we've gotten through so far, but I know I'm going to go a lot deeper. And so I'm
Good.
going to start on YouTube, but I'm going to have
Right.
backups just in case anything goes wrong. So I don't have to worry about it.
That's how it should be. Right. And,
Yeah.
and we would love to have you here again. If you have anything that you're like, you know, adamant, you have something that you want to share, send me an email.
There's always plenty to talk about. I've been
Great.
studying this my whole life, and there's
That's
always
great.
something every day of the week to talk about going on. And I run a teen support group for kids who are just kind of going through discovering what's going on in their families and just need support and don't have, like, kids who have just come out of school and like my daughter dropped out. 2 of the other kids in my group just dropped out. They're only 14. One of the other girls, she's still in school, but then one of the other girls, she also, like, they've all, because they realize what's going on and they're miserable in the school system. And so I'm doing a teen group. So if anybody wants to join my youth support group, they can email me. And I also have a women's support group. And most of us, there's some SRA survivors, and then there's one woman, her kids are under SRA right now, and they've been given to their dad who has them in ritual abuse, and she's trying to get custody of her kids back. One of the other women's super crazy advanced SRA abuse. She's come a really long way out of. So we kind of do prayer support, just talk about our stuff and do warfare prayers. So yeah, we're doing that stuff, and that's pretty powerful. So
Great.
good stuff.
And they can email you at attorney@gmail.com. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I encourage yes. And I encourage everybody to please look at KadoshLife on YouTube and see the new works that she's going to be producing. And hopefully we'll be looking forward to the future works that you and I can work together and have future conversations. And thank you so much for this one today.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time on Wake the Dead.